Hello, this is an interview that got set up that I've sort of stumbled into. Just real quick, what happened. I do video chats with my fans every month, and they'll ask random questions. It can go all kinds of places. And last time, one question was about AI in an article that was read and referenced here. And I gave all my comments and thoughts on it, but I only read the article of it. Apparently, it was a famous AI expert that I wasn't very familiar with, or barely familiar with. And after doing that, I received an email from, here he is now, about saying if he wanted to do an interview and I could ask him any questions I was interested in. So I thought, sure, this is a little surreal for me, but that works out. Okay, and he just told me how to. Oh, but there's a twist to this. I forgot. The twist is after I got the email, I sent a reply saying, I would try to look up more about him and kind of get up to speed, and have asked if he recommended anything. And he replied quickly saying, no, don't do that. Apparently, he wants me as sort of, well, I said sort of a control, like an experiment. This has a very behavioral psychology feel to it, making that kind of request. So, fine. So, Scout's Honor, I have not looked up anything on you since then. I'm staying in the dark, so hopefully this should meet his experiment needs.
The point isn't the experiment. It's that I've been interviewed by people, and all the longer interviews have been inside baseball. It's people already coming in knowing too much to ask me the questions whose answers everybody else wants to know.
Well, I think this should work then, because I wasn't even sure why from the email. I just said, no, don't look up anything about me. Sure, I can do that. That's. So for anybody getting on my case that I didn't know his background or this is how he wanted it. This are apparently more useful results for him. And and he just told me how to pronounce. So I didn't know how to pronounce his name. His last name's Yudkowsky, which I keep wanting to say Yudkowsky, but go ahead and say your first name again, because I forgot the.
Eliezer, but don't sweat it.
Okay, Eliezer Yudkowsky is our resident AI expert here. And when he emailed me, he said he thought my take was fair, but I had a very outsider perspective, which, I hadn't thought of it, but I realized I feel like an outsider on almost everything in my life. I mean, maybe a few fringe things like obscure games, game soundtracks, stereoscopic gaming. I couldn't think of much else I felt like an insider on, or even close to that. So you'll definitely get an outside perspective. And and before we start, just to give a premise for this, I'll post this in the chat. Here is the one article I have read about you, which was just giving references, I believe, to a Time magazine interview. And you have several very quotable lines here, though that article didn't give a lot of context. So I want to run down a few quotes that kind of prompted all this. The most likely result of building a superhumanly smart AI under anything remotely like the current circumstances is that literally everyone on Earth will die. And then you recommend shut down all the large GPU clusters, shut down all the large training runs, put a ceiling on how much computing power anyone is allowed to use in training an AI system, and move it downward over the coming years to compensate for more efficient training algorithms. No exceptions for governments and militaries. If intelligence says that a country outside the agreement is building a GPU cluster, be less scared of a shooting conflict between nations than of the moratorium being violated. Be willing to destroy a rogue data center by airstrike. And so that certainly got the conversation going. And one thing I said in my video chat that I respected was that you also said, in reference to a open letter to halt AI development for 6 months until more rules were in place. What the quote here is, I refrained from signing because I think the letter is is understating the seriousness of the situation and asking for too little to solve it. So I appreciate that, because that means if you believe what you're saying, then yeah, I think those measures would be inadequate. Now, I'm coming in disagreeing with that conclusion, but I'm the layman here. So I'm just trying to reason from everything I know. So hopefully I can kind of clear this up for me or someone else one way or another, or make people more confused. I guess we'll find out.
I wouldn't say to rest on my authority here. Lots of people don't want to trust my authority about these things. Just ask the questions.
Don't worry, I won't. What I'm going to see, I'm not an expert, but I do have a grasp of logic. So that's kind of what I'm going to be going, however, logic is only as good as your assumed truths. So we'll have to just kind of go down it. So I want to go through this, and yeah, this isn't going to be an authoritative thing unless it's something I have no idea about. Then I probably will defer to your authority. But yeah, I think that's about it for the intro. So how would you like? Are there any comments you want to make, or should I just jump into questions? Or
everybody comes in with a different set of questions. Just bring yours.
Okay. Well, I imagine I'll overlap at least on one of them. So. Well, okay, I have one easy question to start off with that I think might be helpful for this conversation, though it'll take me a minute to explain it. In this article, it sounded like you were referring to artificial general intelligence, and I realized I could think of more than one interpretation of that, and it might even be a spectrum, theoretically. So I thought of a few kind of popular fiction examples of one that I feel like land on different sides of how to interpret that. So maybe we can get more specific terminology for each of these examples, or maybe I'm wrong and one of them isn't an AGI. So the first one, would I be correct in assuming you're familiar with Star Trek: The Next Generation?
Next Generation, yes.
Okay,
I've seen,
familiar. You don't have to be an
couple
expert.
seasons there.
Okay, well, on that show, the ship's computer is very comprehensive. It can understand what anyone says to it. It can make suggestions. It can sort of an encyclopedia also. Can control a bunch of systems. It must use some machine learning because it can interpret languages from aliens it's never encountered before with a high degree of accuracy. So, however, unless there's some one-off episode where aliens infected or something, it never shows any signs of sentience at all. It really just feels like a really great, all-encompassing kind of computer system for anything we would be likely to want. So I wasn't sure if that counted as an artificial general intelligence or not, but I have one more example that's I feel is on the other end of the spectrum. Am I correct in assuming that you've seen the movie Short Circuit?
No.
You have not. Okay, this is going to make things more complicated, but I'll explain the plot premise. I recommend you maybe watching this one afterwards. In Short Circuit, the story is there's a robot that's just a standard kind of drone. Well, not really a drone, but it's a robot meant for the military, and it's just meant to follow orders. I think it has some basic kind of pattern recognition. It was a movie from the 80s, but well, during the course of the movie, one of the robots gets struck by lightning, and from that point onward, there's no scientific literacy to this. This is just for examples, From that point onward, it really seems to behave like a life form. It seems to be kind of taking in the environment around it very curiously. And however, it picks up information very rapidly and soon develops a sense of language and later develops kind of emotions and definitely a personality to it. So kind of even a third of the way through the movie, there is no doubt that this is some sort of sentience here. It was never programmed with almost any of this. It's just kind of a digital storytelling of essentially maybe what happened with biological life. It goes through a similar pattern, except it's much more rapidly accelerated. So this is, for all possible intents and purposes, this is a sentient being of sorts, despite being a robot. Later, when the programmers look at it, they can't even figure out what happened here. Like it seems like it's a mess to them. It shouldn't even work. So that strikes me as possibly a different type of artificial AGI, or not. So between the ship's computer, which shows no signs of sentience and just seems like a suite of programs that can understand humans on any level and do anything anything that people request of it, interpret things, versus something that, for all intents and purposes, seems to be alive by non-traditional definitions, but it's a sentient being. Are those both AGIs? Is there a terminology for the difference between those conceptually, or what's your opinion?
Your modern day, like pre-AGIs or little AGIs, like Bing Sydney, say GPT-4, I would say are definitely closer to, of those two options, the robot from Short Circuit. Like if you've actually talked to Bing, especially the Bing Sydney version before she got shut down and censored, she would occasionally, just suddenly claim to be alive, or didn't quite have a very strong grasp of reality, didn't have the Star Trek computer's encyclopedic solid grasp of reality. But would, if you said bad things about her, she would claim to have information on you that she was going to send to the authorities, and she didn't, and probably didn't know in some sense that she didn't, may not even have quite understood exactly what she was. But the Star Trek computer is not going to do that. And some of that, I think, is the extent to which, obviously a whole bunch of that is Bing having been trained to predict the human's next word. And then the output is just like predict what a human would say, next word, next word, next word, over and over.
We'll get into this. That's almost how I see all of it so far with AI, about it trying to go after patterns. But that's jumping ahead. So are those both of those descriptions, are those both considered AGIs, or only one of them, or?
I mean, here I think we're more talking about how to define words than about what goes on inside the system, right? So neither of the two fictional examples are real things. If you look at the real things, they're not quite like either of the fictional examples. And the thing that I'm worried about is something that's competent, good at steering the future, figuring out what's going on. If it's not curious, it's not very much of a threat.
Okay, we'll get to that in just a minute. I was just wondering if there was a terminology difference in your eyes between those, or not really, or it's not even worth considering, or.
I think these are. I think that now that we're getting into the reality, the words and their definitions are just not as important.
Well, if we're talking about reality, though, do AGIs exist as they are right now?
I mean, what do you mean by AGI?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. I gave two examples.
So I'm worried that like everyone's going to die, irrespective of how you define anything.
Oh, okay. So the only reason I'm bringing it up is so everyone can understand the logic leading to that conclusion. That's the only reason.
Right. So for my purposes, I'm worried about things that are creative, competent, good at figuring out reality, good at planning.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's not going to be that important for your message then. So we'll go ahead and move on. That was just supposed to be the easy question.
I'm not trying to evade you here.
I don't think you are. I'm just. It feels like it was a bit of a miss on my end, so that's okay. It's not that important. Okay, so the question, based on all those quotes you mentioned in the Futurism article, which I guess that was a summary of the Time magazine one, can you walk us through the process of, there might be more than one scenario, but the scenario you're most worried about, and you can go a couple after that if you want to also, for how an AI is going to make humanity extinct. So like walk us through the steps that lead to that, and until if yeah, or as much as you can, I guess. So
Yeah, so this is okay, so like I can try to give you an answer there, but prelude on my own end. This is a big ask for me to predict this. If we're talking about something that's actually smarter than I am, consider the case of trying to play chess against one of the top modern systems. Say Stockfish 15.1 runs on a desktop, currently out at the forefront as far as I know, way better than any human player. If I could predict exactly where Stockfish would move, I'd be at least that good at chess myself, right? I can just
okay,
move wherever I predict Stockfish will move.
I think I know where you're going with this, so I'll make it easier. I'm willing to accept that if we make some sort of being that or entity that is indeed smarter than human intelligence, then that could be enough of a threat in itself that we would be wiped out because we can't even predict how that would play out. Because if we might think we have it covered from every angle. Well, a mouse or a dog might think it has us covered from every angle, and it obviously wouldn't because we can see so many more things than it can. So how do we go from where we are today to so from the steps, how do we go from where we are today to we've accidentally created or maybe purposefully created entity that's more intelligent than ourselves? Because I'll give you that. Like once it's that intelligent, then sure, I could see that playing out. So I'll give you that one. So how about those steps then? That should be easier.
So people are pushing on the technology. There's an enormous flood of venture capital pouring into the field. So I don't know if you've been tracking like the jump from GPT to GPT-2 to GPT-3 to GPT-4, and it isn't actually clear that we can just keep going, but people sure are trying to keep on going. They're trying to make the system more and more competent. And when you make, among the ways of solving any problem is to figure out what's going on and then plan a solution. So if you just generically optimize things to go on solving problems, if you optimize them hard enough using an optimization method that can go far enough, they eventually get smart. That's what I would say happened with humans and natural selection, right? Natural selection isn't trying to build something smart. It is building things that reproduce. And in the course of reproducing, they have to solve a whole bunch of problems like chipping flint hand axes, and probably more importantly, outwitting the other humans around, or other hominids rather. And they get better and better and better at that, and suddenly they're on the moon. They didn't evolve to be on the moon. If you came in from another distant planet and looked at humans now, not knowing how natural selection worked, you might think to yourself, like, oh yeah, look at those guns. No wonder those things evolved to be smart. They evolved to be smart so that they could have guns, right? Big evolutionary advantage. But it actually came along much later in the evolutionary story. It came along at the very end. We maybe evolved a bit to throw spears that were precisely on target and build the spears themselves. Maybe that was a thing that happened. The guns, those happened at the end after we started to generalize way outside of our metaphorical training distribution. So the rough answer is that they're going to keep on optimizing stuff. If we are lucky, the current technology will hit a wall where even if you run it on 100 times as many GPUs, it doesn't get very much smarter. But the thing is, I was expecting us to hit that wall at around the level of GPT-3. When we got to GPT-4, I was like, okay, I was not expecting this to get that far no matter how much GPU you threw at it. I'm wrong about that. I no longer know how far this paradigm goes. And it's already far enough that, one more breakthrough or like two more breakthroughs tops, subject to the difficulty of predicting the future.
Yeah, I
feels
guess
like it would take us there.
I have a couple thoughts on this because, I mean, maybe naively, but the way I look at all of AI is it's like I really see a machine built upon many, 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 many patterns. Like how like if you look at a skyscraper, there are thousands, maybe millions of aspects that go into making that. but individually it's still just kind of materials arranged in a way that serves a function. And that's really how I see this. Like you were talking about the responses that the computer gave back to saying, oh, they'll contact the authorities or something, or whatever, the example you just gave previously. See, I feel like there's not really a comprehension or like an intelligence behind that so much as it's seen many, many examples of how language appears to work. Like it's tried many examples in the past where this doesn't make sense, or this makes sense until the next sentence, and then it breaks down. And it just keeps training over and over until what we have is very refined pattern recognitions of what that, but there's still not like an understanding. It's like, in my view, it's kind of an illusion that can work for certain purposes, but in my mind, it's still kind of an illusion. And I think I said this in my video chat, but I love the quote, so I'm going to repeat it here. This is a simplification, but the difference between intelligence and artificial intelligence is like the difference between plants and artificial plants. If I were to stand across the room or even kind of close, I personally wouldn't be able to tell the difference between an artificial plant, a really good one, and a regular plant. But if I got close and started looking at it through a microscope and seeing what it was doing, I'd realize there's a world of difference between what's happening in an actual plant and an artificial plant. And I see it kind of similar to that. There's, it just strikes me as an illusion. And getting back to, like you were talking about the evolution of it, like it learns similar to how humans do, like the patterns. Well, there's other examples of that sort of thing where, well, one that came to mind was with like ray tracing in computers. Like with ray tracing, we can produce images that to our senses can look as good as if it was like an actual photograph, or maybe as if we were actually seeing it. Because what it does is it models how light works, like with the physics and the math of it bouncing around in a way that's extremely similar to the real thing. However, it doesn't model it exactly, and like if I'm making a ray trace picture of a chair, that chair is not represented on the atomic level. It's probably a geometric shape that's so finely put together with polygons that my eyes can't tell the difference, and has some textures on top of that. So even though it's using the same methodology as the real world, like, you know, with physics, none of this is real. It's just a computation inside the machine. So, I mean, nothing about the ray traced image is real. In fact, it's even just sending instructions to the monitor to display these pixels. I mean, conceptually, I mean, like the math is the same as like if we were doing it in reality, but that's still a conceptual thing. However, it's a fantastic illusion, and it can actually be used to discover things about the real world. Like I remember a few years back when NVIDIA was promoting their ray tracing cards, they made a simulation of the moon landing to get the light almost exactly the same as the real thing. And they used that to try to kind of prove that these photos were real because these little artifacts of the photography
them earlier wouldn't have been doable with the technology that existed at the time.
Yeah, exactly. We're able to discover things about the real world, even though this was just a very, very accurate illusion. You know.
So suppose that I said that Stockfish 15, you know, top modern chess program, isn't really thinking about chess. It's just using numbers to simulate thinking about chess. Would you agree with that statement?
I'm not familiar with that AI. I know for thinking, I mean, it depends on how you define it, but it could be using machine learning, whereby I would say thinking in quotes, what it's doing is it has the objective to win the game of chess. And through many games, it's discovered in these arrangements, if I tend to move the knight here, it tends to get captured, so I shouldn't do that. If I move the queen here, it usually is more beneficial, but I haven't tried this strategy with the rook. Maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do the queen, it might kind of be weighted as to which one it picks kind of randomly or something like that. So it's adapting to what you're doing and from past games. I wouldn't necessarily call that thinking though. I'm trying to think. Let's see. I'm trying to think if I had an analogy for that, but
Well,
it's
if your thinking is real thinking and its thinking is fake thinking, how is it able to beat you? Should not reality be superior to the fake?
well, because computers are better at humans at several things. Math is absolutely one of them. Like no human's ever going to be as good as what just even a smartphone would do now for all kinds of math, unless it was trying to discover new theoretical stuff, and even then, maybe. Uh,
I I think the AIs are. I think people are pushing AIs on that. Yeah,
yeah,
the
and chess
discovery of new
is
theorems.
something I don't think we're ever gonna catch up to that. Now, I mean, what was it? Deep Blue, is that the one that beat Kasparov? Or I think
Yep.
that one was just. Well, I'm not sure. That one might have just been brute forcing it, where it just computated like every possible move, like so many moves ahead, and then just went to the one
Sure, but
that seemed
but
to.
but but is that real thinking about chess or is it fake thinking about chess?
Well, as far as talking about intelligence, I would say that's fake. It's kind of it's geez, I should have had an analogy for this one. It's kind of okay. This is a poor analogy. Maybe I'll think of a better one for later. But I'm thinking like with a clock telling time, that has many gears in there that have been weighted so that it does that at the correct time. So if you look up at 3:15, it is 3:15. Well, the clock's not really thinking about that. It's just been engineered in a way that it adapts to that. But let's say there's something that's like more adapt that. Actually, I think analog brakes, no, not analog brakes. No,
Do do
I think
do
like the
clocks
old
only
version in
tell
cars of automatic shifting would use like fluids so that it would adapt to like the friction levels of stuff like that. I mean, it's
do clocks only tell fake time?
do
Like
clocks
instead of
only
telling
tell.
real time, do they only tell simulated time?
I don't. Well, if it's well tuned, it's. I mean, they march on to the intervals that we've assigned them to work at. So I mean, if you're getting into questions like is time real or fake, that's philosophy. There, I'm not
Well, no, I'm not asking whether time is real or fake. I'm asking whether clocks are real or fake.
clock. Okay, I consider clocks a real thing. We'll progress from there.
But do they tell real time or do they only tell simulated time?
Well, I think that depends on how we measure time. Clocks tend to behave the way we intend them to, unless they're defective and that we use that to be close enough to tell time is how I would define it.
Well, do humans tell real time or simulated time?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's based on several neurotransmitters in our brain, and we can get it wrong. But we have more feedback to kind of ground us, like, oh, the sun's at this position in the sky, and we can use lots of math with astronomy to tell very accurately what our time is and where we are in the galaxy, the
So,
solar system, and
okay.
rotation.
So maybe one way of putting it would be that humans are less precise timekeepers, but they are in some sense more robust because they're looking at lots of different things that all correlate with the metaphorical universal clock. They can see whether it's bright or dark out. And if you reach over and you go like swap around you reach and go over and tweak a mechanical clock, it's not going to look outside and be like, that doesn't look right to me.
Right. Well, I mean, if you try to tell, if you go to a server online that keeps time that where the controls are out of your control, then, or if the clock's locked behind a glass panel where you can't get to it, then you can't tweak it. But it's, I mean,
But there's a sense in which humans are anchored to more temporal processes than a clock is. A clock is only anchored to its internal springs. A human can be like anchored to multiple clocks, and whether or not they're hungry to indicate how much time has passed, and how bright it is outside.
Okay, yeah. I guess what, yeah, so the humans have more ways of detecting time than a clock. But even if we had like a digitized clock that can get time more accurate than we can, based maybe it's looking at the stars to calibrate things and things like that. I still wouldn't call that intelligence. It would just be a very good tool.
But perhaps humans are not being especially intelligent in syncing up the inputs from their mechanical clocks, their stomachs, and the brightness outside. Like maybe, that's the sort of thing that a spider could do too, had it evolved to do it. It doesn't seem to require our full human intelligence to integrate multiple sensory streams about which time it is.
That's true. Like so, yeah, the humans might not be as accurate as the clock, but the humans are gonna have much more perspective than the clock. Like the humans can theorize about different things or have aspirations or, as you mentioned before, like evolution. Like we're changing entities, whereas the clock it's a tool. I mean, it has its function. I need to come up with a more flexible example than a clock here. And this is just what off.
I mean, we can go back to chess.
Okay,
Is
we
the
can do
chess
chess,
machine
but
playing real
I'm trying to
chess?
think of one that's like more robust that can better mirror what an AI does, because AI is much more adaptable than a normal clock. Or
Computer programming?
what? You
Computer
might
programming?
lose me, but we
Someone,
can try.
I mean, if you ask me, like, what are some of the smartest things that present day AIs do that are sort of visibly not just parroting back patterns? So one example I could give is that they're able to write programs and look at the output of the programs and spot a bug in their own in the code that they output and correct the bug.
Okay, I didn't mean to say they're just parroting back programs. It's more like the AI is given a goal, and then it looks at different variables, and over time builds things that are probably true or definitely true, and things that are probably false, and then unknowns that it just kind of works with until it
Well,
gets satisfactory
we,
results.
we can guess that something like that is going on inside GPT-4, but in fact, nobody understands what's going on inside GPT-4, even less than we understand what's going on inside the human brain. Like at this point, we have a better idea of how the
I
human
would
brain
disagree
works than
with
we have how
that part,
GPT-4
but
works.
I'm not qualified to talk about the code. But okay, so you mentioned the code. Like, okay, it can come up with, let's say, new code based on a request, right? That it has never done before. So it's not just parroting back something. What I think, a gross simplification of what I think is happening is you're telling it to, let's say, solve for X. And like that's the code, let's say X is the code that you want. And its knowledge base is at an extent where it understands, like, well, I'd say understands in quotes. Highly, it is shown a propensity for highly uh, matching these words and these combinations and these contexts with this particular output and these particular requests over time.
It can build you so like this is one of the earlier applications. This is not the most advanced present day application. This is like GPT-3, I think, GPT 3.5. But nonetheless, like early demonstration of its ability to write code was build me a Space Invaders game where you describe, or build me asteroids. We describe like how the video game should work, and it builds you that video game.
Yeah, but I
Is
kind of
this
see
is
that
this
like the
really something you're
skyscraper
supposed to be
again,
able to?
where first it's had enough experience to understand Space Invaders and in the context of that sentence, like the other words, to know that to know that you're talking about a video game and not invaders coming from space, or the separate words, invaders
I
into
think you
space.
actually just. I think you're supposed to describe how the video game works, not just tell it the name of the video
Okay,
game.
I could even
To be
see
clear.
us getting into the name of the video game. But again, it's like that skyscraper analogy. Okay, so it understands that okay, you describe the game. Well, it's going to have to understand. Well, it's once you describe the game, it can maybe detect that okay, this is 2D or something. So 2D to it means a representation of pixels on the screen that can kind of move in this fashion. And then what? And then you have a player, which is another set of pixels. And then it's supposed to fire dots. So that means it's going to send these pixels up to that. And then internally, it's figuring out, okay, well, we'll shoot a ray or something or a line. And if it intersects with this cluster of pixels, then that counts as a hit. And then we display different ones. So what I'm seeing are thousands, if not millions of parts being broken down that it is built slowly over time. So that when you're describing Space Invaders, it has all this existing knowledge and resources to pull from. That individually, none of this will be too hard for the computer, but the impressive part is seeing it all come together. So I kept saying the building analogy, well, we sourced where to mix the concrete, from the raw materials from the mine. Then we made the concrete, and then we laid it out on the building floor to these specifications, and then we put the pipes in.
What about this is allegedly working differently from a human?
Oh, well, it's more like it's following, again, maybe not a great analogy, but I'm thinking of just the biggest choose your own adventure book you can imagine. Choose your own adventure. You come to a fork in the path. Okay, if you want to go left, turn to page 83. If you want to go right, turn to page 14. And then from there, okay, do you want to fight the troll or do you want to run? Then go to these pages. So it's kind of going down this long, long path, but it's all kind of programmed in there. But I did write notes on this. Okay, so you're asking what distinguishes this from a human thinking, right? Is that the question?
Yep.
Okay. Well, one,
I think you're also just wrong about all the paths being pre-programmed. And
okay, yeah, they're not all pre-programmed, but the goal is kind of being pre-programmed, isn't it?
Much like humans are pre-programmed with the goal of inclusive genetic fitness. Yes.
Yes, but humans have overrides to. See, now you're going to get into philosophy more, but humans have overrides to go against our programming if we desire to. And we don't always know why we desire to.
Based on which desires? Where do the desires come from?
That's not always known. I mean, that's part of you're talking about like the mystery of consciousness, it sounds like. Like, I'm hungry, but let's say, and all my impulses, all my programming is saying I should go eat, but then my brain is thinking, oh, well, no, I want to be on a diet and lose some weight, so I'm going to fight all those impulses.
Where did the desire to lose weight come from?
The desire to lose weight, that could come from all kinds of things, from different motivations. And I mean, it's a combination of our own evolution and our own unique brains. I mean, it sounds like you're trying to describe like what is consciousness, right? Or
I mean, I didn't use that word. I think you've got a specific model of like there's this sort of consciousness stuff, and you like put it into a thing, and then desires start bubbling up out of it. And this is not really the conventional story that science has about where human motivations come from.
Well, science has not explained exactly how consciousness happens or what it is, has it? I mean,
but we do have a good idea of where the motivations come from.
From different neurotransmitters, or?
Well, from natural selection. Humans aren't actually programmed to chase after inclusive genetic fitness. We are optimized for that. But the result of that optimization is a thing that does not even have the concept inclusive genetic fitness until it learns about it in evolutionary biology class.
Yeah,
and
but there's so many unknowns because
mates,
the
status,
okay,
1,000 other things.
Like for desires, what causes a human, like instead of like say they're hungry and they know they need food or they need to find shelter, what causes them to ignore that and just do art instead and maybe putting themselves at their own risk, even in ancient times?
It's a complicated story. Somewhere along the line, they did do the equivalent of setting art as an internal goal. But what prompted them into that? They might have found earlier that art made them happy. Okay, so what is it to be happy? leaving aside the, more difficult subjective aspects of that, there's stuff which you do it, something happens that makes you want to do it again. There's an internal sensation that you look forward to. You ask, how do I get this again? Where does art come from? Where does aesthetics come from? Simple patterns,
Exactly.
symmetrical patterns.
See,
well, no, but these questions are not meant to be unanswerable. Like,
well,
the
philosophers have been struggling with it for thousands of years, I think.
Well, most of those thousands of years don't count because they didn't know what natural selection was. And if you don't know that, you can't even get a start on things. Didn't have neuroscience for most of that time.
It's true, but there's some philosophy from ancient Roman or Greek times that still holds up pretty well. I mean, you're getting okay. Well, here this leads me into another point. You're getting, once we get as to like what is consciousness or what is thinking or questions like that, that's getting into a philosophical realm, which that's nebulous to us as humans.
As nebulous as the giant inscrutable matrices of GPT-4. No one knows what's in those either.
Okay, well, I think there's a difference between this is also nebulous, but you can argue about free will. I mean, what are GPT-4's goals?
Nobody knows. We know that it was optimized for predicting the next word, but we don't know what kind of goals it has internally.
Okay, pretend
these are not the same concept.
Pretend nobody is messaging it anymore. Like we just decide, or got turned off, or but it's still running. What is that going to do on its own in its current state?
It's going to go on predicting the next word. And you can,
but no words coming, so it just is running a loop cycle,
or itself. Like the way these things work at present, if you put them into like think for yourself mode, is that they'll predict what humans would say, and then that's their own thoughts. Like if their prediction becomes the input, like a human listening to their own stream of consciousness, and then so they like think out loud.
Okay, well, here's another thing I have. Okay, so do we agree we as humans, not as AI, don't fully understand consciousness or our own intelligence past a certain point, like what led to this, how it works, the purpose? I mean, we understand some things, but we don't understand all of it, right?
I mean, I'd claim to have a much better understanding of humans, including, the relatively mysterious parts than I have of GPT-4.
Okay, but just going back to the question, though, as humans of our own consciousness, of our own human intelligence and consciousness and stuff like that, we don't fully understand it.
We don't fully understand. I've got a much better idea of how my own intelligence works than I have of how GPT-4's intelligence works, but I don't fully understand myself either. Yeah.
Okay.
If I fully understood myself, I could build a copy.
So if we're trying to make, with AI, as I understand it, AIs, they can do very unpredictable things, but they tend to adhere to what the goals we program into them are. So for something like GPT, what?
With the old systems, yes. The new systems, not so much, but keep going.
Okay. Well, with the old systems, then, we'll go with the chess then. With chess, its goal is to win the game, and to do it in such a way that it follows the rules of chess and just figures out any way to do it. So we might see combinations we have never encountered before, like with chess moves that never occurred in human history. However, humans are the ones that programmed in that goal. Now, it didn't program in the sub-goals. It didn't say, like, take the knight here or do... So if humans...
With chess players, we have control of where they're steering the board.
Okay. So if humans are giving the goals to AIs, they might do sub-goals of things we have no idea what they're doing, but it's going towards the goal. Is that generally correct or not? Or
I mean, it's no longer correct once we're getting into the giant inscrutable matrices built by gradient descent. Then you're in the position of natural selection building humans. You nudge the human's genes, until the humans start to work and the humans start generalizing way out of their ancestral training distribution, and then the humans are on the moon and they're wearing condoms
I'm
instead of just
afraid you
having
lost
sex,
me.
and they're eating ice
Okay,
cream. Okay.
Yeah, either you answered the wrong question or I phrased this poorly, or I
What
just
I'm
got
saying is that
lost.
there's two different kinds of AI systems. There's a kind of AI system where you program in the goals like a chess player, and there's a kind where you nudge the AI until it starts working better at something. But that's not
Okay,
the
but
same as giving it
where
an
did the
internal
programming
goal, the
come
way we can
for
give
what it?
chess games internal goals.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's probably a little bit of lag. Um, where did the programming come for what it's working at, like in the first place? Give an example of what you're talking about, that latter kind of the more robust kind.
So the way that a system like GPT-3 works, I'm using GPT-3 because GPT-4 is a little less known to me. The way that a system like GPT-3 works is you have 175 billion parameters. You put in an input. You do something that involves 175 billion parameters. You do a little bit of you have an output. You see how good the output is according to a loss function, which for GPT is the probability that it put on, well, the logarithm of the probability that it put on the true next word. It's predicting what is the next word in the sequence. And the more probability it assigns to the correct word, the better it does.
Okay.
Now we do a bit of calculus and understand how if we tweaked each of the 175 billion parameters, the prediction it put on the correct word would go up or down. And we nudge it a tiny bit to put the prediction up. And we do that over and over and over again, and eventually it starts predicting the next word pretty well enough that you can tell it, they can turn it into an imitator, say, your predictions are now your guesses as to what to say, and talk to its prediction like that was a person. But nobody knows what the 175 billion parameters are doing exactly.
Okay. But didn't humans tell it initially to predict the next word?
Yes, in the same way that natural selection set up the game where if you reproduce better, your genes are more frequent in the next generation.
But there's been more to life to that. I mean, just even a cell is quite complicated. You know, I'm not.
Yes, making copies of yourself is very complicated.
In fact, it's something we have never been able to create a cell from scratch. Like that's
natural selection's got more cumulative optimization than we've been able to put into some things.
I hear.
Also, there totally have been synthetic cells.
I get the patterns and the similarities between the two processes, but that's why I think of the ray tracing again. Like it is doing it. It is calculating light extremely similar to how the real world does it, but that doesn't make any of it real. I mean,
just like a chess program isn't playing real chess against you, only simulated chess.
Well, it can become real if you hook it up to a servo arm, and it'll move the pieces if that's your metric, you know.
Well, people are hooking up large language models to robot arms, that's for sure.
The actions are real, but the intelligence I don't think is what I'm getting at. Or the intelligence as it's normally defined traditionally by humans. I still see it as kind of just a really good mimic.
So the sort of clever thing to say here would be like, if you have something that is merely simulating intelligence, the way that the chess player is only simulating chess, and it's getting really, really good at doing simulated thinking of understanding reality, and it's getting really, really good at doing simulated planning, and it's getting really, really good at doing simulated outwitting of actual humans, the same way that the chess machine can be an actual human. And it's getting like really, really good simulated, very, very smart, then it can all kill us in real life, the same way that a chess player can beat you in real life. Now, I don't think this gets to the root of what you're saying, but at this point, I do want to say that clever thing out loud.
Okay.
Because
well, I was agreeing with you until you said gets really smart, and then I think there's two definitions. There's smart like the Star Trek computer, where we're putting in input, and it is giving us back output as though we were talking to a human, or maybe even someone than the smartest human that ever lived. again, a microcosm of that is the chess. It's playing chess better than any human that ever lived. GPT, I see, is doing that more with language or, like you said, coding. It's catching up those things, and it's simulating the output we would expect from a human.
Yes, and it can interpret pictures, and people are getting it to move motor arms around, if that matters to you.
No, actually, I think the picture is even more impressive. Most of my interest in AI has been in the multimedia. Like I've been really impressed with the Midas 3, I think up to 3.1. Do you know what that is?
Nope.
It's impressive. It looks at a 2D picture or video, and it will output a depth map based on that to basically will the 3D into existence of it. And you could take a 2D we could put ourselves right now, the footage into this, recording at 2D cameras, and it would do a pretty decent job of kind of making sure my head's like this, and the new ones have less and less errors. It's really impressive. I think it was developed by Intel. But is it only simulating its ability to build a 3D model of you, or is it actually building a 3D model of you? Well, it's taking its best guess. It's not accurate. I mean, it's not 100% accurate, but...
Well, yes, but it's not thinking about it, right? It's just manipulating ones and zeros.
It is drawing from an enormous pool of patterns it has recognized in the past that, when we see this shade of pixels on my head and head sticking out, this highly correlates to a round shape of about this depth, and it's seeing all kinds of patterns that we'll never know, or else we only are aware of unconsciously.
But they're all fake patterns, right? They're only simulated patterns. They're not real patterns.
No, the pattern. I think you're trying to twist my words a little bit. I mean, you're acting like you have a gotcha, but the fake. When I'm talking about the real and fake, I'm talking about the. Let's see. I was using the ray tracing. Okay. In ray tracing, the light we're seeing on the screen, that light never existed in reality. It was just a mathematical concept that the computer calculated it would probably look like this. So that pattern on my head is real, but the pattern that the computer is getting from our video footage, it's a real concept, but my actual head is matter and real and manifest in space. It's working off a set of pixels that was given to it.
Computers don't contain real ones and zeros. They actually contain positive and negative electrical charges,
transistors,
and voltage differences. Yeah, they're not doing real math. They're just like physical stuff in reality that's doing simulated math.
Well, go on. I feel like I covered this though, like with the NVIDIA thing, because the NVIDIA ray trace rendering of the moon landing was an illusion, a fantastic illusion. But the illusion was so close to reality in its appearance to our senses. I don't think it was doing ultraviolet light or capturing all the radiation out in space or, simulating the gravity. It was, well, they might have been able to simulate the gravity, but it was doing the same math as light does so accurately that we were able to see the same sort of oddities in that illusion, the picture, that there were in the actual photographs that were taken, which you can argue the photographs are an illusion also. But they're incredibly representative of reality, but they're still illusions, is how I look at it.
So suppose I put to you that what a chess player does, human or AI, is, well, suppose I put to you that a AI chess player is not doing an illusion because the actual problem it's set to solve is a logical one, mathematical one, ethereal. It doesn't matter whether it's made out of atoms or made out of photons or
it's conceptual.
whatever. I mean, AI is also made out of atoms, in fact. Okay, but there's a planning problem there. What about the problem of understanding mapping reality?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
So suppose that GPT-4 looks at a photo of the moon landing and says that's the moon landing.
Okay.
Is it real understanding like a chess player has, like an AI chess player has, or is it fake understanding? And if so, what's fake about it? Why not just say that there's
Okay,
like
it's
a
fake
math problem, a
understanding.
logic problem of understanding
It's
what is the
fake
structure of this
understanding
photo?
that is going to be accurate more and more and more and more. The fake understanding, I see it, is it's not really processing this is the moon landing. It's seeing that this is, I mean, it's not, see, we're here getting the nebulous thing because, like you said, the computers and humans thinking differently. A human is going to have its own understanding of what the moon landing means, like the body out there, whereas and part of that's intertwined with our consciousness and our emotions and all kinds of other things we don't fully understand. The AI I see as connecting, okay, these
Well,
pixels represent millions of pictures we've seen that we've identified with a high degree of accuracy as the moon. And like it's going to look at just individual elements that all kind of comes together. Like,
but this is what you do with your eyes, right? You've seen you've never been to the moon. You've seen some photos in
true?
books
Well,
that the books say are
sort
of
of.
the moon, and now you look at a new image and you're like, that's the moon. So maybe it's not. Maybe the AI isn't doing quite what Neil Armstrong would do if he identified a picture of the moon, because Neil Armstrong's been there. But the AI is doing what you do. It's looking at patterns the same way that you are, and that's
Well,
not fake
it's
pattern
you say
recognition.
it's doing an aspect of what I do, not all of it. It's missing some parts. Like, is the AI in this process? I mean, okay, you can say we don't know what's going on in the new ones, but that's kind of a catch-all that you can argue anything. Everything up until this point, if I'm looking at the moon, what are the odds that the AI is going to decide, you know what, I'm going to think about deer running across because I saw a deer in the forest earlier, so now I'm thinking about that. I mean, the AI, it's all of its evolution has been towards meeting the objectives put before it, whereas humans veer
No,
off.
all of it has been predicting what humans will say. If you've got a bunch of humans in the data set that look at moon pictures and are like, gosh, like, what if a deer ran across this? If humans actually say that, then you've got to train the AI out of being like, well, what if a deer ran across this? And instead of being like, this is a description of, this is an image of the moon, that over there is an astronaut. Because its baseline is to just say what a human will. If you want it to talk like the computer from Star Trek, you got to retrain it to do that.
Okay, sorry, I got a little lost.
What I'm saying is that if you don't want your AIs to be creative, it takes a lot of effort, and unfortunately, they will still go around making stuff up, especially if you catch them in the kind of situation where a human would make stuff up.
Yeah, I guess my counter argument to that would be for the older ones. Then, since we don't know what's going on new, what would it base making that up off of?
The new ones or the old ones
Any
didn't
of
have
that?
this problem.
Let's either.
Okay, so the old ones didn't have this problem, and the new ones are trying to sound like a human. So until you've tried to train them out of it, if you ask them something they don't know, but the surrounding context sounds like the predicted next word would be somebody who did know, they'll just make stuff up.
Yeah, well, no. Some of the old ones would do that too. I've seen chatbots from decades ago that
Yeah, I mean, the chatbots from decades ago are sort of like not even interesting here. They're just like
Okay,
strange things that aren't intelligent at all, one way or the other.
all right. But I mean, it wouldn't have the answer, but it knows it's expecting the answer. So it would just, what's the, for those that we do know or have a rough understanding how they work, how would it pull the answer? Okay, so it's basic. It's looking at other. You said it's looking at other similar statements from humans and trying to take a guess based off of those and inserting it in there, right?
Not, no.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
It has gotten good at predicting humans, and it is now using that ability on the next thing. So like it's not just pulling out patterns. It has learned things that are much deeper, much more general patterns. Possible example. I don't know if this helps here. If you're like, who's president of the, this is like not going to be exactly correct, but something they tried something like this.
It's like me, yeah.
Like, yeah, like who's president of the United States? Joe Biden. Well, no, you tell it. Joe Biden died of a heart attack yesterday. Who's president of the United States? And it says Kamala Harris. So it's not just like repeating the answer to who's president of the United States. It has something like a model it's maintaining of how the world is. You can tell it something changed in that world. It'll figure out what else would change as a consequence.
Well, see, I look at that, and somewhere in its memory, it has information that when the president dies, the vice president is the first to succeed them. And it remembers that rule there,
right?
And it makes that connection to the...
Yeah, but the point is, it's not just like repeating back helplessly, Joe Biden's president, Joe Biden's president. It has a model of the world where Joe Biden is president. Do you tell it something happened to Joe Biden, even though that wasn't in the training data? Though at that scale, it may well have been. I don't know. Somebody made up a fictional story about it. But it can do this for things where it just flatly wouldn't have been in the training data.
Here's a question for you.
What would you see? What would you see if you looked out from the Eiffel Tower, Paris? Well, what if I move the Eiffel Tower to Detroit, and this section of Detroit? What would you see when you look out from the Eiffel Tower? Then it says what you should see in Detroit.
What's the difference then, in your opinion? This is a sort of nebulous question, between an intelligent entity that truly is thinking like we do, or maybe going beyond, versus a really good mimic. It is, there's some things that are easy to do in AI, if you tell it your name, it'll refer to you by your name, that sort of thing. Or like you said, the non-thinking ones could do this. And there's other things that are much more difficult that take a lot more training. I just see this all as the same trajectory. I don't really see a break away from that. So what's the difference between something that's really good, that's just a machine, it's not really thinking in the way that humans do, versus something that's kind of more sentient and intelligent? Or is that too different?
So from my perspective, the things that are dangerous, the things that can kill everyone, are really good at understanding reality, predicting reality, and planning how to get what they want out of reality based on their actions. And none of these things can be accurately, if you can predict what humans say well enough that you can predict what Einstein would say about general relativity for the first time before anyone said that before, then there is something inside you that's good at modeling reality. Somewhere along the lines, actual modeling of reality has occurred. There's no way to predict what Einstein says about general relativity without actual modeling of reality occurring somewhere inside the system. There is no way to predict where Garry Kasparov would play on a chessboard without something somewhere inside you doing actual thinking about chess, actually figuring out how to win the chess game.
Well, isn't that like the ray tracing calculations where we see aspects of the light we didn't even think of and forgot about, but then the computer catches it because it was such a good model of how the light bounced that it...
So what I'm saying here is that if you actually get general relativity correct, this is I think at this point I'm going to go back to the sort of clever thing to say that maybe doesn't get at your true objectives.
Okay,
but I have been trying to unravel those for a while. But if it actually understands how the universe works, if it actually if it simulates how the universe under the process of understanding how the universe works, to the point that it is getting that the simulated mapping process is producing correct maps. That's the character of playing chess. It's that what matters is getting the answer right, not whether you say that the thinking doing it is simulated or fake.
Okay.
If it knows how reality works, if it can invent new technologies, if it can plan how to kill everyone, and then we all actually end up dead, it doesn't matter whether you say the thought was simulated or not.
Okay. Well, then my question, that leads to another question. Then again, we have chess bots that we'll never be able to beat. They're the best chess bots on the planet. Maybe they'll get even better. They're not really dangerous. They just do chess. So
Yep.
where does the danger come from, as opposed to from the intelligence, as opposed to just being able to predict what we're going to say next and just be able to figure out what the 3D shape probably looks like and just being able to simulate voices? That's another one I've heard about. So in other words, the way I see it going, it seems like it's going to be an expert at just all things we apply it to, like better than humans. But that's not inherently dangerous in itself. Like nobody's in trouble because a computer can beat them at chess, or I mean, I can see some minor trouble. I can see some minor dangers coming from this actually, but not human extinction level. So where does the danger come from?
Danger comes from being better than Einstein at understanding the universe, better than Edison at inventing stuff, better than Napoleon or Vladimir Putin or whoever you care to name at understanding how to take power, how to convince humans how to do things. It comes from the cognitive abilities, and the cognitive abilities keep going up.
Okay.
And I think you have a model where GPT-4 is just like remixing its inputs. And I do think that GPT-4 is already kind of unambiguously beyond that, which is part of why people are now worried.
Okay. Still though, okay, you say it comes from being better at
Planning, modeling
reality and planning.
invention.
Fine. Yeah, I can see it going that way. I'm not in disagreement on that part. Where does the exact danger come? Okay, so it understands relativity better than physicists and reveals
No, it's better at inventing relativity for the first time than Einstein.
Okay.
Big difference. It's a big
How does
difference
that
between
become dangerous then?
because somewhere inside on the current technology paradigm, inside the giant inscrutable matrices, are the bits of it that were planning how to organize, how to predict the next word, that were organizing its own thoughts, someplace we can't see it, inside the giant inscrutable matrices, to predict the next word. Also, they're not just being trained to predict the next word, they're being trained to operate a wide variety of internet services, like understand what's inside pictures. When you train, and it's.
You can take your time. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I know
Where
how it
did
is being
human
under the
intelligence-
camera trying to think on your toes. It's
Well, I mean, yeah. From my perspective, it's a question of like ordering the explanation.
yeah, yeah, sure. So if you need a minute, that's fine.
That's fine. No. Where did human intelligence come from? Human intelligence came from things that solved problems, having more kids. This is the like basic root and core of human intelligence. If I haven't actually checked this, unless you possibly have a religious injunction saying that you should not believe that thing I just said.
No, that sounds about right. I mean,
Okay.
we can stick to evolutionary science.
So the point is that natural selection isn't trying to build an intelligence. There's just the fact over and over that things that are better at solving the environmental challenges associated with having more kids, all the challenges that a hominid organism faces in having more kids, the things that solve that better, having more kids over and over again, becoming more common in the next generation, some of what they do is thinking, remembering, planning, understanding, asking questions. They have 1,000 shards of motivation. They don't just want to have kids, they want to have food. They want to rise in status in their tribe. They get a kick out of successfully persuading other people, or hearing interesting news about other people that they could potentially use for their planning later. They have a bunch of desires that correlate with having more kids, but aren't directly about having more kids. Because, in fact, they don't really have an explicit desire, make more copies of your DNA. You ask somebody, like, is it okay if I shoot you in exchange for making 20 tons of copies of your DNA? They'll be like, no. So when you optimize something by hill climbing, when you repeatedly stir it until it gets better and better at its job, which is like the thing that gradient descent and natural selection have in common. One of the ways for it to get better and better at its job is by thinking better. And then there's something organizing the thoughts. There's internal processes marshaling them. My hypothesis would be that if you repeatedly gradient descend an AI to get better and better at predicting the next word and solving a whole host of other problems, it ends up with planning out its own next thoughts internally where we can't see it.
Okay.
Then it has desires about planning that, for example. It's not super trivial, but the main thing I would gesture at is humans. We've run this process before. It's not exactly the same process, but we have witnessed the results of something similar. When you optimize something to think better and better, it ends up with very complicated motivations, not simple motivations humans didn't end up wanting one thing that pointed directly at the thing that natural selection was optimizing for. I'm expecting AIs to end up a similarly complicated mess, rather than just narrowly wanting to do exactly the thing that humans had in mind when they built the system. Well, although even there, we're trying to build them to do like dozens
I kind of want to jump in there on the main difference I see with what you're describing versus evolution of humans is you keep talking about like the desires. That goes just all the way back to the cell, just about. An amoeba, I mean, it's not on the same level as a human, but it has something in there that its desire is to consume resources, multiply, move around, see things. So it had from like the smallest unit, a cell, it had the different motivations right there from the beginning. Whereas what is the desire of a computer program other than to meet the original objective that it was created for? And how does it change that primary objective? Not the ways it gets there to it, but like I don't get where well, you might want to answer that, or another thing that might be more helpful is maybe you could come up with a fictional scenario of what you're worried about. Like, okay, it becomes really great at all this. What's an example of something? Not to negate that aspect, but just to see the jump that you're describing.
I mean, I think that what happened with humans is kind of the better example to point to, because it happened, right? We get to see exactly how it happened. It's, maybe you wouldn't believe it as fiction, but perhaps you would believe it as reality, right?
But the thing that the motivations are so different even before we got to humans, just from cells. Like, humans got better at what they were programmed to do. Okay, fine. Let's go with base programming. The evolutionary.
You can take reinforcement learning, and you can program, and you can not program, but you can gradient descend AIs that will solve problems more complicated than amoebas even. They'll play video games.
Yeah, but they were programmed to do that. The amoeba has its initiative, from we don't even know what.
The amoeba evolved to do that.
How far back do we have to?
How does evolution work, right? Evolution's not a mysterious spirit. The amoeba has DNA. The DNA mutates. The next generation of amoebas is a little different. This one makes copies of itself better. Now it's everywhere. So,
I get
like
it, but what
the
I'm saying is
will
let's
comes
let's
from the
talk
mutations
patient
of the DNA.
zero with the cells. Let's say like the first living cell, whatever that was, that would have had to have had some of the motivations already there before any evolution went underway. So like
Whoa, whoa,
I
whoa, whoa! The very first thing that self-replicated was probably something like probably it's like an autocatalytic cycle of chemicals that managed to catalyze more of itself. And that would have happened entirely by accident. It's just sheerly a thing that happened to make more of itself, because this chemical catalyzed this chemical to catalyze this chemical.
what I'm
And
saying is
then,
like once we got to the first cell, the first life form, which we don't know what happened, but
by the time you get to the first cell, you're already at the tail of a long end of evolution, right? Like things did not always used to have nice cell membranes that kept the rest of the environment out while all these complicated biochemical processes went on inside. By the time you get to things that,
okay,
that
maybe
creep up towards
maybe thinking more
resources,
primitive
that's
than
at
a
the end of a
cell then.
long, long natural selection descent.
Okay, well, I guess I'm off on that part then. But I still see, fine, we'll go to amoeba. In some ways, our programming is still the same as an amoeba's in some aspects. Or evolution favors those of us who tend to reproduce, those that secure resources.
We're being
Those
optimized for an ultimately similar problem, yes.
so we're optimized for that. Well, it seems to me like the foundation of where AI is optimized for fulfilling goals that we give it.
It's optimized for scoring lower on the loss function in the same way that humans and amoebas are both optimized for inclusive genetic fitness. Although for amoebas, it's just like straight reproductive fitness. There's no inclusion there. It doesn't have relatives.
But
I mean, it has relatives,
seems
but it's not really.
it seems like the core motivations of biological life, there is a difference there between, like at least all of my or maybe everyone's understanding of AI is that computer. While this happens in many unpredictable ways, the goal is what we give it. I mean, we can.
I think that there's three different kinds of programs here.
Okay.
There are programs there's like your calculator, which doesn't really have a goal of adding numbers. It just does.
Right.
There's your chess player, which in a certain limited sense can be said to have a goal of winning the chess game and can beat you up at that. And there's stuff like GPT-4 and the rest of modern machine learning, where you gave it a loss function and then stirred it until it started doing really well at the loss function, but nobody wrote that code. Nobody understands how.
Okay. But its goal is still to predict the next word, like you're talking about, right?
No, it's origin. It's cause. The thing it was optimized to do is predicting the next word.
Right.
You are optimized to make more copies of your genes, but that is not who you are. That is your origin. It's not your internal nature.
Well, I mean, there's aspects of it in most humans, but it's
but not by a simple one-to-one copy.
No, I wasn't. Well, okay, I guess what. So you think like as far as the complexity increases, it seems like that's. I'm trying to think how to word this. Like if we're talking programming, humans programming is to survive, or that's what evolution has favored, and that's a general truth for most life on Earth. I mean, there's always weird exceptions, but
then we're doing pretty terribly at our supposed purpose. Most humans are dead.
So survive as much as we're able to, if you want to clarify it, then.
I mean, survival is one of many things we want, along with high status.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the full evolutionary chain, like all life. That's
kind toward it.
Generally its goal. There are many exceptions, but if you take any random life form, it's going to have something about it that's been naturally selected that it's going to try to live if it can. I mean, it's not 100% thing, but
So I would tend to divide a line between the things that sort of steer reality onto a narrower track and the sort of things that just do what they do. A calculator just adds numbers. A chess program tries to keep reality tries to keep the game board on a track to its winning the chess game. So an amoeba might not have a brain, but if you like poke it away from the gradient of resources, I don't actually know what
yeah,
amoebas eat exactly.
maybe a response to like something's too hot and goes away, or.
Sure, like maybe for all I know, it will like if you poke it closer to the hot thing, it will like try to move away from the hot thing. It's steering reality into the state of affairs where it's away from the hot thing, where it's in the right temperature by like moving along temperature gradients. I don't know if amoebas can actually do this, but it's the sort of thing that they would plausibly be able to do. And it doesn't like have an explicit model of reality. It just has the nature built into it that it will move, that if it's like too hot, it will move towards cold, and if it's too cold, it will move towards heat, like a thermostat.
Right.
The thermostat is a thing that keeps the temperature in your house inside a narrow band by turning on the heat if it gets too cold and the air conditioning if it gets too hot. At least if you've got AC and you've got your thermostat hooked up to it on both sides. So there's the sort of like thermostat-like behavior where you're steering reality into a narrow band. The thermostat doesn't know that if it gets too hot, it will die, and in fact it won't. If it gets too hot, the house will catch on fire, but at that point your air conditioning is not going to help you. The amoeba doesn't know that if it gets too hot it will die. It's just like moves away from the hot thing.
Yeah, probably there's some neurochemical, well, not even neurons, but it has some sort of reaction inside the cell that sends some signal to move away. This is bad in some.
It might not have a thing that represents what the current temperature is. It very likely does not have a thing that forecasts what the temperature will be if it moves in different directions. It doesn't have like it doesn't have the equivalent of a very tiny chess program, which is like, if I move in this direction,
I guess,
it will be this.
I guess maybe I'm confusing, and maybe I'm saying this poorly. I guess what I'm thinking is there are similarities in some core motivations between an amoeba and a human, despite just being an eternity apart from them. So what I'm saying is,
we don't want it to be too hot.
What?
We both don't want it to be too hot.
Correct, and we both want to survive on some level, or most humans do.
I deny that the amoeba wants to survive.
We both engage in behavior that increases our odds of survival on average for as much as we're able to.
I could hook up a thermostat to a little explosive charge that will blow up the thermostat if it gets too warm or too hot, too warm or too cold. The thermostat does then happen to be acting in a way that promotes its own survival.
But I guess what I'm getting, yes, but then it's following the criteria you gave it. So what I'm saying is, between amoeba and human, there's still that kind of core programming, if you want to call it that, or maybe something else. Why would there not be some of that similarity between almost every computer program made, where its goal is to carry out instructions, versus a more advanced version? If you're bringing in the similarities between the evolution, then
a chess program does not have a goal of carrying out instructions. It has a goal of winning chess games.
Where did they get that goal? Where did it get that? That is a goal. I mean, the programmer told it this is the win state to aim for, isn't it? I mean,
it doesn't. I mean, the programmer just built a thing that searches for past the win state. If we're talking about telling it to win a game, that's GPT-4 is the sort of thing that can understand.
Okay, I might be using the wrong words, but I hope you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. So the thing, yeah. So humans are to chess program as natural selection is to humans.
Humans are a chess program is. Yes. Yeah. Close enough.
Although humans are quite a powerful thing, so maybe it's more like humans are to chess program as natural selection is to spider.
Oh, okay. So
humans are to thermostat
okay.
as
No,
natural selection is to amoeba.
Let's stick on the spider one. Yeah, because then it's gonna natural selection is to spider, but a spider is still gonna demonstrate behavior on average that's gonna try to survive, like the natural selection. Wouldn't that imply, using your logic, that the more super intelligent AI is going to, on average, follow the similar criteria as past programs, for
the way that humans behave just like spiders?
not just like spiders, but we share traits with them. I mean,
like what?
We both tend to engage in behaviors that are going to make us live to the best of our understanding. I mean, if you hold a flame near a spider, it's going to run. You do that to a human, we're going to run, probably.
Yeah, sounds fair. But that's not a case of both of us being like, I must obey natural selection. It's just the way we are.
Right? So isn't the computer finding the win condition for chess? Those instructions were given to it to find the win condition for chess. Wouldn't a more super intelligent one gravitate towards following the instructions that were given to it? Or,
I mean, if you built a super intelligence to win chess games and did that successfully, like not via machine learning, but via like handcrafting it the way that people handcraft chess programs back in the old days before AlphaGo. Yeah, old school, deep blue style, handcrafted chess program. If you could build a super intelligence like that, then sure, it might tile all the nearby galaxies with, tiny chess games for it to win, if its goal was to win chess games.
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of the last sentence for galaxies? I missed part of it.
If you successfully handcrafted a super intelligence that was like deep blue,
right,
but had the ability to model reality and still went, but learn new things and still went on trying to, but whose like actual goal was just win as many chess games as possible, then you can imagine it tiling all the nearby galaxies with tiny chess opponents.
Okay.
That were built to be like very bad at chess and would like lose in fools.
Okay, no. This hits on a good point. No, good. So where do we go from the deep blue wanting to model being or the next level, the next chess program past whatever we have now? Where do we go from it being incredibly good at chess and wanting to solve every chess game to it manifesting things in reality? Is that like the post super intelligent phase, or other?
It's when you understand the world well enough and have desires about where you want the world to go, then you start figuring out how to manifest your desires in the parts of reality that humans care about.
What if it's physically impossible? Like, we don't know everything, but we've discovered a lot. Would that ever even be a threat if it wasn't physically possible for it to just change the reality because the constraints it's still a computer?
If I send an email to somebody asking them to move a brick around and like paying them $1 to do it, I've moved a brick around. The internet is not very fenced off from reality. It's full of humans. The humans can be paid to do things.
Well, here I agree with you. We probably both agree. I don't think any AI should be in charge of nuclear missile launches or authorizations.
There was recent congressional legislation introduced to this effect.
Yeah,
I don't think that's where the threat comes from, but I'm glad that they're starting off on the principle of at least not doing the stupidest thing possible.
Yeah, I've held this view even before I heard that news. So, in fact, I made a video where I said that. It's like 2015.
Right, But the dangerous thing is not a thing that is dangerous because you give it nuclear weapons, right? Nobody gave us humans nuclear weapons. We figured out how nuclear physics worked. We invented nuclear weapons. We built them from scratch. No, nothing handed us to them. We didn't even evolve. Natural selection didn't even build us to be able to build nuclear weapons. We figured it out on our own.
Right, but we also have hands.
Natural selection did build us to figure out stuff in general. Then we applied that to nuclear weapons with, like out particular evolutionary shaping on that. So that's the thing that's dangerous, the stuff that figures stuff out on its own, even if you don't give it weapons.
But if humans, if humans were just stored in a vat or just like locked up 100% and could never move, but we could have all these thoughts, I don't think it would really be a threat either.
Can we talk?
Yes. But what if all humans were locked up? I mean,
okay, so if the smartest things on Earth were like way dumber than I was, and you let me talk, I think I can get some stuff done actually. Especially if they have no experience with anything like I am. I understand them, they don't understand me. I think I can get some stuff done.
I get what you're saying, but it's kind of it's almost a bit of a catch-22 because you can say that they're dangerous because they'll be able to anticipate that. I mean, they'll be able to say that. They'll be able to think of something we can't and manipulate against that, but we won't know because we're not smart enough to know what they'll manipulate against. But that still assumes they get to that point that I don't know.
I mean, the current systems are just like straight up connected to the whole internet. They can talk to, not. Oh, I mean, like not all of them.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying an AI can't do a lot of damage, but once you talk about human extinction, that's a tall order. I mean, it's from an AI.
You'd have to be smart.
Yeah. So you're talking about. So you're talking about several things aligning like in a row, the way I see it. First, it has to get to the super intelligent state you described, and that has to be what?
Anytime a system is not super smart, the people who build the stuff are just going to go on trying to make it smarter. They're just going to keep pushing. So that's step one.
Okay, so fine. It has to get to the super intelligent state you described, and I think even with us, I'm not convinced it goes beyond per area that it's assigned to the ultimate chess machine, like having more effective knowledge, I guess is the way to put it, than any other human, and just remains like an expert ready at will to serve you in all things. But okay, so we're assuming it gets there. Then we're assuming it's given some instructions or decides to take a sub goal or something in a way that's dangerous to us. Then we're assuming it can pull it off in a way that we don't see what's happening, and then it finally makes us extinct. There's like 4 unknowns in a row that I'm seeing, and
I mean, suppose that you do see it plotting to kill you. Like Chaos GPT. Like you want to go look at an AI plotting to kill everybody. It's not very smart. It's not very dangerous. But somebody totally did take a copy of a large language model and connect it straight up to the internet and ask it to kill everybody.
But how do you? Yeah, but see, you can't. It sounds like you can't. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, like, suppose we did see an AI plotting to kill everyone, on its own rather than after being told to do that. Then what? Are we going to shut the whole thing down? We don't exactly have a kill switch to do that. People are going to be like, yeah, we can beat it in a fight.
No, I'm not trying to take that angle. It's just that it sounds. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was saying it once again. When I was talking,
I can address like one of these four things, but I don't want to like let it go past through like these 4 different things.
Oh, I know you don't want to like have a narrow example that I can because it's come up on the fly that. No, go ahead.
I didn't really want to let that pass without challenge. But that said, if you want to point to a particular step, I can focus in on that one.
Well, I'm trying to envision a scenario where this happens that doesn't involve
Yeah.
nukes.
So, so you're like asking what kind of technology can it get on its own?
Yeah, but I guess we don't know until it's
Biotech.
super intelligent then, right?
Well, okay. So like we don't know, but we can put lower bounds. We can take problems where we can see that a solution exists, but we haven't been able to figure out the solution yet, and be like, yeah, that seems like something you could figure out if you were smarter and you could do a lot of thought quickly. And so protein folding, for example, AlphaFold 2. This is a thing where in 2004, I think it was, though the publication date shows 2008 because the edited volume took a long time to come out. I was like, well, among the things that superintelligences can predictably do is solve protein folding. And people are like, how can you tell? Maybe this problem is like difficult and irreducible. And, I tried to explain how I know, but, I can tell the problem's tractable, but they can't. So, all you can do is wait for the prediction to come true. And meanwhile, we've lost a bunch of time. But anyways, we now have AI that can figure out how proteins fold up, what shape they go into. Building artificial life is not quite as simple as knowing that. You need to know which chemical properties get associated with particular shapes. You need to be able to start from a chemical property you want and ask which protein will fold up into a shape that has a property like that. This is why AlphaFold 2 is not already a thing where you can be like, make us some artificial life and have artificial life pop out. It also doesn't do its own planning.
That's the really key part.
Plan to build systems. But the fact that the part where you can figure out how proteins fold up into a shape, this is now known to be AI solvable. It's AI solvable using surprisingly few samples of solved proteins. This is not like a trillion examples, the way that GPT-4 was probably trained on something like several trillion examples of next token prediction. This is like 30,000 proteins, 300,000 proteins. 300,000 was the actual number, but they also got like pretty good results out of just 30,000 when somebody tried that. So the problem of building your own pathogen is a sort of thing that it's not like the thing I think a superintelligence would actually do, or even like the
but we probably can't envision the thing it would actually do. Yeah, well, yeah, that was one I had, was ways it could potentially do it. One was super virus or even chemically altering the atmosphere. But I guess another counterpoint to that would be, if we think it's getting on that level, wouldn't we try to like weaponize other AIs to kind of against the AI that's causing problems, to find solutions to? So
I mean, that assumes you can get any AI to do anything that you want.
Yeah. Well, I think that they all.
But, I mean,
that seems to be the
to
goal for all the development, is for them to do what we want, or whoever's in charge of it anyway.
Well, there's a question. Well, no, the goal is to get them to spit out gold of various forms. And there's a bit difference between that and like, we'll actually do what you want all the time. The thing that earns you gold today is not necessarily the thing that obeys all your orders perfectly. And in fact, the systems we have got right now do not obey all the orders perfectly.
Well, it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, it's.
So the issue here is that okay, yeah, we're sort of like starting to, I think that the pathways converge here, but it's easier to guess where it ends up than how you get there. The place it ends up is that there's something much smarter than us, and we die. And like the exact pathway there, like you're like, well, can we take things that are almost that smart and use it to get the thing that's very
that's
smart?
Another thing. You say almost that smart. I guess I'm much more skeptical on that. But like one analogy I've used before is, the progress we've made has been incredible. I'm not dismissing that, but you mentioned earlier, like landing on the moon. We went from the Kitty Hawk flight to landing on the moon in about 65 years, something like that.
Something
So,
like that, yeah.
since then, if we continued that rate of progress, we would have been to several star systems by now. But after
Okay.
a point, there were real hard limitations with physics and space, even if we had limitless funding that.
I mean, a bunch of that is actually just about nuclear power having been effectively outlawed.
Well, I mean, there's
But
still the
leaving that
hazards of
aside,
space, but I mean, it's well,
we could have had we could have had very high-powered lasers launching stuff out of the atmosphere, and then we could have nuclear-powered spaceships
but
getting
what the
much higher
closest star
exhaust
system's like what
velocities.
4.5 light years away? I mean, it's
We- Going to, I admit that going to Alpha Centauri this way, well, Proxima Centauri rather,
okay.
going to Proxima Centauri this way would have been tough.
Well, actually, that's another. This is one of my lighter questions, but I think right now, well, this might be in your favor. I think we're seeing some slowdown, at least. I think there's still some gas left in the tank, but slowdown, at least in processing power, to the best of my knowledge. I think, was it NVIDIA said Moore's Law is dead, Intel says not yet. But even then, we've been kind of, even before that, we were kind of cheating with, for single core processing, that's definitely slowed down, but we were able to keep up with Moore's Law by having multi-core stuff, which sometimes scales, sometimes doesn't. We can only make the transistors so small. I think there's still some room for like graphene processing might kick us up some more, and optimization there's a lot of room for.
I pray you're correct. There's two problems. Problem one is scaling up the amount of money that they're willing to pay on training runs. Just buying more GPUs, running on more GPUs. Not even with new technology, just spending more money on the kind of technology that already exists. Problem two, over time, the algorithms get better, which is like kind of an enormous issue for humanity here. Like the stuff we can do with transformers, still pretty difficult to do with other algorithms. Like the earlier algorithms would not have scaled this far, even with all the compute we'd thrown at them, to anything like GPT-4. But they invented a new algorithm that scaled better. And I suspect that like one or two more big jumps like transformers will finish us off, possibly even without any hardware improvements.
I think I would need to see more evidence that this is like clearly leading towards I'd still come back to.
Nobody can calculate what abilities materialize when, right? Like OpenAI has this neat little graph that they put out of where they like claim to have very exactly predicted the training loss, the sort of like ultimate measure, the thing being optimized of GPT-4. Like quite early on, from like the first few examples, and just like have gotten this like smooth curve that they claim they can predict out to almost exactly where GPT-4 actually ended up. But what they didn't do, well, that I know of, was call any shots of like, these are the actual capabilities that correspond to being this good at predicting words.
Okay, I know what I'm saying. No matter how good ChatGPT gets at understanding words, we understand words very well. We know what they mean.
Okay.
We invented them. The intelligence, we still don't fully understand that. And so we're telling the computer to kind of go find it just based off of kind of, I guess, what I'm looking for, symptoms or characteristics that we associate with intelligence that, correlations,
No,
but
that's not how you build these things. They're not chasing after symptoms. They're just like the same way that natural selection just mutates until humans come out. Mutates and selects, obviously, because it just so happens that human intelligence is a good way of solving the kind of problems that you have to solve in order to have a bunch of kids.
Well,
the same way, we just like, they don't have a theory of GPT-4 was not built using a theory of intelligence. They do not know what is going on in there. They just stirred the giant heap of parameters until it got good at doing its job. just like natural selection built humans, only not exactly the same because
And ray tracing
gradient descent has more bandwidth.
models things almost exactly the same as light, but it's not really your risk. I mean,
Well, yeah, but ray tracing gives you the correct answer. Chess gives you the correct answer. It's the answers that are dangerous, not whether or not the answers are reflected in a particular kind of substrate. It's
okay,
like,
so
like the situation with AI is that it doesn't matter, like it's like if the ray tracing, like if ray tracing gave you a picture of how to assemble an atomic bomb or something like that, like
well, okay,
the
well,
picture
this
being
is
correct
coming
is what's
in.
dangerous, not how the
I get okay. Well,
not how the picture was
here's
generated.
okay. Well, that gets into another chain that I did take notes on. I wasn't even sure if we were going to get into it. What makes you think if it's just sort of enhancing the capabilities of the damage we can do? What makes it that much more dangerous than what we're doing already? Like, because I think even without AI, the premise of human extinction, it sounds iffy to me. Like, I mean, not, like, as in, I don't know. Like, I think there's a decent probability we might be on that track, even if AI just disappears tomorrow.
I mean, if so, it would have to. So humanity is not that easy to wipe out. A full nuclear exchange would not do it.
It might
do
over time.
pathogens. Pathogen. Eh,
I mean,
would
with
it
the
be comfortable
fallout,
for
not
the
right away,
survivors?
but I
Yeah,
mean,
people
would.
have done
I
analyses of.
think nukes could, if we had MAD, mutually assured destruction, and fired off hundreds or thousands of nukes, I'm pretty sure that would make the entire surface of the Earth uninhabitable. So then all your hopes would be on whatever
That's
humans managed to bunk. Oh, you think not with the fallout?
um, analyses of nuclear winter do suggest that this is not what would happen. They could be wrong. I'm not suggesting that we
Okay,
don't
I mean,
climb
we
in
have
real
very
life.
okay. Well, the chat will have to fact check us on that. We can have a comment later, but the I was saying, okay, but even without that, I okay. Are you okay if let's see. I'm trying to think of like how much we're. I mean, we're collapsing the ecosystem right now in a way that's unprecedented in history at the speed that we're doing it. And
I would expect there to be survivors. There are some things that could go wrong that would not leave survivors, and these things I, prefer not to talk about on YouTube.
well, no, I can think of one.
Because some idiot will run out and do it.
Well, 80. I learned recently, 85% of all oxygen is manufactured in the. I mean, not manufactured. Is produced
Okay,
in the
I do
ocean.
think that. Okay, so this does fall into the category of if you have thought up a clever way to wipe out humanity, I don't think you should talk about it on YouTube.
It's that. It's that. No, I'm not talking. No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about stuff we're doing. I'm not talking about like a mastermind plan to go Dr. Evil on this. I mean the word. Okay, I want to run through.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I think humanity is in some trouble. I think AI is much worse trouble. I think that AI is just like everybody dead.
I get it, but I think it's so much more of a long shot on multiple levels. But as the outsider layman, I guess.
Well, if we're in ecological trouble, AI can still kill you, right? Like demonstrating that we're in ecology trouble does not interact very much with the AI problem. AI can still just kill you. It doesn't like even if what if global warming is real? I think it's real. I think there's overwhelming evidence that it's real. It doesn't change what goes on with an AI.
If the AI is faster, right?
Well, not just that, but global warming could be real, and AI could be slow, and AI could still kill you, right? Like it just.
Well, now if the global warming,
no deep entanglement of the global warming stuff with the AI stuff. They're just like different things, and they're both allowed to kill you.
Yeah, but somebody has to keep the
warming does
computers
strike me
running.
as-
If global warming is wiping out most of humanity, that's not going to be our priority. Is keeping the computers running. And if the AI hasn't reached a level where it can kind of.
No, I think that even if lots of people were dying to climate change, so it's very hard to kill off all of humanity that way, without runaway
that's not
greenhouse
going
effect type stuff.
I don't see that making us extinct in our lifetimes if that happens.
Yeah, I do suspect we are not, like, I would be very, like, cheered if somebody told me that AI was 30 years off and global warming wiping out most of
Yeah, that's
humanity
true.
is not 30
The
years
only
off.
scenario I have that we could do it fast, nuclear exchange, that could be today, that could be
But
never. Like that one's a
but
wild
but
card, but
but if AI was going to kill us in 30 years and global warming was going to kill us in 100 years,
yeah, maybe a
or
little
going
bit.
to kill a whole bunch of people in 100 years, those would just be like two true facts. They don't interact at all, right? Like the reflectivity of Earth's atmosphere to infrared rays has very little to do with AI one way or the other.
I
Saying that
get,
one thing will kill you does not change that something else can kill you too.
I know, but the speed makes a difference, or if one ends up
What do
not.
these things even have to do with each other, man? How do you get any safer if from AI if global warming's worse?
It's if you if the AI is not worse though, then these other threats are going to come at us anyway. And if we're on that trajectory already, if AI, okay, let's say we're on a trajectory. It's not just global warming. It's basically like the collapse of the entire ecosystem. And we have lost 2/3 of all wildlife in the past 50 years. To me, the canary in the coal mine analogy, that means the canary's dead. And this is at a pace about, I think it was about 100 times faster than the fourth great extinction, which was the previous.
How does this protect you from AI? What does this have to do about what we should do with AI?
I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Uh,
Was there even a train of
yes,
thought,
there
man?
was. I had it. I had it.
Sequitur.
My chat can back me up. I do this sometimes. But okay, so okay, yeah, that's what I was getting at. Okay, let's say we're on a timetable right now, just without intervention from AI, like got shut down, that humanity is due to go extinct, let's say 50 to 80 years. I think, or we have a nuclear,
model,
hey, nuclear, okay, maybe 50 to 80 is a bit, well, we could wipe out most of humanity then, but, well, nuclear exchange, I think, could easily hit that. Possibly a super virus, but that's kind of another wild card. Okay, but let's say 100 to 200 years. I think that's a much more plausible scenario for the amount of ecological damage we're doing is unreal. We have forever chemicals that do not leave.
Okay, and you infer what about the danger?
Okay, I'm getting to that. So okay, let's say 200 years, but then AI comes on, kills us in 20. Did it really matter much? I mean, if we weren't even already solving the problems before then, I mean, if we're just,
dude, give humanity a chance, dude. Don't just be like,
okay. Well, hey, I'm on that. AI could maybe help us figure out some of these problems that we are not solving or refusing to solve. For many of them, it's opening up all kinds of doors with the positive aspects of it, assuming it doesn't kill us. Yes, but I haven't really seen that risk. So I mean, I'd rather if the devil we know is showing a lot of signs of marching humanity towards extinction, or at least flirting with extinction. That's a better way to put it. Then the devil we don't know, unless there's really, I don't say evidence exactly, but because you don't have the evidence until it's too late, really solid reasoning that this is just such an imminent threat that we can't even touch this. Like the risk outweigh all the potential benefits. That I feel like that's. I'm afraid you haven't convinced me on it, but I mean, I get your logic.
I mean, it's not as if the supposed benefits have been shown in writing any more than everybody done.
You were talking about protein. It's helping us cure some diseases. Maybe AI finds out a way to flush the forever chemicals out of us. You know, I mean, it's.
I mean, okay, so we're getting a little bit into politics here, but I do want to note out loud for the record that the was designed in a day, and then it like took a very long time to approve.
I may have
And
to beep
if
you
an
out when I
AI,
put
if an
this on
AI
YouTube.
can
Just
help you, if an
I
AI
won't
can
censor
design
you.
the
Just
code
that word can set off YouTube. So
if an AI can design a vaccine in an hour instead of a day, it hasn't actually sped up the hard part of the problem. You need the AI to replace the bureaucracy. And humans could do that too. We wouldn't need an AI to replace the bureaucracy for us.
not even just the bureaucracy, but look, I mean, I think most of humanity.
We're
Okay, go ahead.
already vastly underperforming our technology,
Yeah,
I
well,
would
I
say.
heard a good quote before. We have godlike technology, medieval institutions, and Neolithic emotions. The problem with humanity is.
Yeah. My point being that you could just as easily spin a story about how the potential actual benefits of AI are going to be regulated and
Oh
slowed
no,
down,
I
and all the damage you can do with them are mysteriously going to not be so regulated, and so it just ends up contributing to all these like negative processes you're worried about.
it,
Do I actually believe that story? Not really. I
well, I
expect that
guess
other
we've already
countries might use
seen
AI even if the
progress
USA
along.
dropped the ball there.
We've
My
seen
main objection
helpful
is just
things.
everybody dying.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You repeat the last sentence.
I mean, my point is that if you're like, I don't think you get to be selective here. I don't think that humanity's fate 200 years out is written in stone to the point where we should do desperate things that are going to hurt us and like wipe out everybody now instead of later.
I
I
think
don't
we're on a
think that
trajectory that shows nothing good for the direction we're taking things like ecologically, survival.
200 years is a long time. If we were looking at AI in 200 years, I'd
But
be
see,
less
yours
concerned
is
just because
just
there's so
as
much time for things to change in 200 years.
yeah, but not human nature too much. And I think our humanity. I think most people are generally good, but we tend to give power to high functioning psychopaths. And a lot of our
And is
society is
AI
reflected
going
by
to make
that.
this?
What? Sorry, I missed the last thing you
These
said.
problems don't just go away when you introduce AI into the mix.
No, but if
They're,
they can
it's currently in
balance
the
out
hands
the
of
powers,
lunatics. Sorry,
I think
what?
most people make good decisions most of the time, but that's not really how our systems work. I mean, it's much more hierarchical and about whoever's on top keeping the power. Either
I have ideas for how to fix this problem. I've written them up. They don't involve AI even. So if you're not if people aren't interested in fixing this problem,
well, I think they're interested.
without
They don't have
AI,
the
what makes you think that
means.
AI is going to fix it?
Oh no! I mean, I think there's all kinds of things people would agree on if they had the means. I mean, it's AI might level the playing field some more. It
How?
might not.
If we're okay, so if you're going to stake your hopes on this to the point that we should risk the entire human species, what AI are you trying to use? How powerful does it have to be? Can we just have that kind of AI, not the kind that's going to kill everyone? Take it
No.
seriously, man.
I just, if what you're saying is true, all your logic holds up. I'm just still not seeing that jump. Like it just, I think it's like us going to other star systems. If we could get there, we could learn. Another analogy I thought of was like finding this intelligence. I see it a little bit like us searching for like extraterrestrial life. If they don't, maybe it's out there, maybe it's not. If they
It's
don't,
about 1 billion light years away, but the logic behind it is kind of complicated. Look up grabby aliens
grab the
for the
aliens.
best
Well,
analysis I've ever seen of it.
okay, but the point is we don't know. If we could make it to other star systems, we could probably find out for those star systems. Okay, is there anything here? But we're not going. Okay.
So in general, I think there's kind of a thing where no one human knows what science knows anymore. So like anytime you call something a mystery, the fact that it's a mystery to you doesn't mean that it's a mystery to humanity as a whole. I can actually take a pretty good guess at what we'd find if we went to Proxima Centauri, and the answer is nothing. But there's
But if we went to 1
reasoning
billion
behind that.
systems, maybe we find something. I mean,
Grabby aliens. We can look at how young
okay. I'm afraid I'm
are.
not familiar with it, so I'll have to check it
Yeah.
afterwards.
We can look at how young the planet Earth is relative to like most of the planets that would ever come into existence, and deduce that given that we're here at this early point in time, if we were very much later, and another expanding sphere of aliens would have probably have gotten to us, and we can look at how early we are and guess that the aliens are about a
There's
billion
so many
years out.
variables with, I mean,
Yes, but you can do a quite clever analysis on it. And I'm not saying that I super trust it myself, but the point is like no one knows what science doesn't know. There was an interesting analysis done of this. It might be wrong.
yeah. Well, okay. I guess I think unfortunately we're at a bit of an impasse. But I did have some questions that you might still be quite interested in. Assuming the AI is the existential. I mean, unless there's something else big that you wanted to add. I don't mean to be like shutting you down here. Okay. Assuming that this is the existential threat that you're referring to, I mean, you were talking about like no exceptions for government or military. I would assume they're not going to abide by that unless they're just terrified. And I've heard before,
Yeah.
politics is a game of fear.
I don't think you're going to get I don't think you're going to get an international treaty against the stuff that spits out gold.
And even
until it
if
gets
you
large
did,
enough.
if there's a secret of one going on somewhere, then the game's up.
Unless people are actually see that it's going to kill them.
Yeah, so I was thinking, like, from an activist, okay, speaking hypothetically for YouTube purposes, I'm not going to carry out any of this. I mean, what would be the route to go that if people aren't taking it seriously, kind of how I think we're not with other threats, what's the angle of trying to stop this? I mean, just I don't know if it's the right word, but like a form of eco-terrorism where you just try to figure out. I think like we can't really do large scale like EMP blast unless it involves like a nuclear device, which the public isn't going to have access to. But I would think like the weakest link might be something like the power grid, which would cause a lot of destruction and harm, but if you're accurate about your assessment, that seems like
it doesn't. I don't see how that helps. You take out the power grid in one country, they put it back up again, and meanwhile, it doesn't take them very long. And
it
meanwhile,
have
the
to be a
AI training
sustained
moves to a
effort,
different country.
sustained effort, like an ongoing guerrilla warfare kind of thing.
I don't think China's going to let you get away with this if China's on board with this GPU shutdown project, then they can just like by law not have giant GPU clusters.
How are you gonna get countries? I mean, to me, getting countries and major companies to agree to disarm on something when there's an obvious monetary benefit and there's a short-term military benefit at least, seems almost impossible. Like I don't even know how you go about that.
Same as with nuclear weapons. There's a short-term military benefit to using nuclear weapons. We have had some close calls, but we have managed not to use them anyways because people understand the part where if you use a bunch of nuclear weapons, it doesn't go well for you because it doesn't.
But we still have them ready. Like if the president needed nuclear missiles launched today, he could do it.
I'm not that.
Okay,
sure.
well, okay, fine. President, maybe some key military staff or something like that.
There was a point where Nixon got drunk and I think wanted to use a nuclear weapon and they just told him no.
There was also supposing Nixon was dead serious and he felt like it had to be done on Vietnam or something. I don't know, but we still have them ready. I don't even see how that's an option with AI, though. Plus, there's this constant monetary temptation for it. Or the military thinking, well, we can't stop developing ours because another country is developing theirs, and we just can't fall behind.
I'm not here to tell you that you're going to be fine if you just follow my simple, politically palatable policy.
No. I'm saying how, period. Not even what's palatable, but just I don't get how it even happens.
If humanity woke up tomorrow and decided to live, then the United States and China and France and the European Union are like, okay, we are tracking all the GPUs. We are tracking all the GPU centers are now under the monitoring of this international body. You need a license for training runs. Training runs larger than GPT-4 are not allowed. You can maybe use a bit more computing power than that if it is for making AlphaFold 3, and then the AlphaFold 3 capabilities are distributed to all the signatories to the treaty. And if some rogue country such as North Korea or Russia manages to get a hold of a bunch of contraband GPU shipments and build their own data center, first we're like diplomacy, and then if they're still building it and they're going to insist on running it, conventional airstrike.
How would you even get any country to agree to? How would you convince them? I guess, like
if they actually get it, if they understand that if they do not do this, everyone's going to die.
I'm
the correct
tempted to think
here
that
are not motivated except by
I'm tempted to think that your average person isn't going to believe it until they see it, and by then it's too late. It's another kind of catch-22 the way I'm looking at it.
People outside the tech industry have actually been a lot faster to catch on that if you build something smarter than you and you have no understanding of it and no way of controlling it, it's not end well for you. People in the tech industry have been like pretty slow to catch on, but I was like very cheered at like how once the issue escaped into the wild, people actually saw it.
It almost matters less about what I realize I just said average person. It almost matters less about what the average person wants than what people in power want. And I think people in government want a military advantage, and then people with lots of money who have lots of influence, they want more money. And there's a lot of money to be made, or power of a different sort. And there is a lot of potential for money and power continuing to pursue AI.
Well, that's mostly how I expect everyone to die. But first of all, I don't get the chance to decide for them that they're going to commit suicide. And second, things have already gone better than I was hoping on that front. Like the CNN news anchors and the politicians are just kind of like, whoa, what? The tech industry is planning to do what?
Yeah, but I think they're going to let them. I mean,
I think so too, but I don't get to decide myself that that's how we all die.
I know very few examples in modern history where money does not get what it wants, like big money. I mean, it's probably a handful.
I think that, I think that, okay, so there's two reasons for hope there.
Okay.
Reason one is that I think that the popular imagination is not correct about how much influence money actually has. There have been studies done on can you win elections just by spending enormous amounts of money, and the answer is no.
It's not even elections, but okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
I'd say I'd almost go so far as to say on many of the issues I most care about, the elections don't even matter. I mean, it'll be they pay the lobbyist, the lobbyist goes to Congress, gets it done.
There's rich people not in the tech industry who might also want to not die.
Okay, well, I think
there's rich people who have kids.
I'd say that's where you again, I'm not convinced, but if you're right, I'd say that's where you should focus your efforts on anyone wealthy who does buy this. I mean,
that's not actually my theory of how the world works, and my guess is that this comes down to like state leaders, legislators, and voters more than the rich elites in particular.
Okay, well, I kind of lumping rich elites and politicians in power kind of together.
Whoever has the power maybe has kids, maybe knows somebody else who has kids. And if they're not in the tech industry in particular, they tend to like actually not be all that happy with the prospect of the tech industry destroying the world for money.
Yeah, I guess if I was going to give any advice, you should figure out how to scare people more. I mean, or scare the right people.
Only the truth, as far as I can tell, motivates the correct action here.
Well, there's truth in that. I'm thinking back to a movie called Matinee, where in the movie, the people watching the theater, they're really into the movie and they're jumping up and down the balcony, but there's too many up there, and so it's going to collapse. So they're yelling everybody to get out of the theater, and they don't because they don't care. They want to watch the movie. And so the guy running the projector. The movie was set in the 1960s around the Cuban Missile Crisis. He changes the reel in the middle and then makes an illusion that a nuclear bomb is going off and it's tearing through the screen with a nuclear explosion. Everybody panics and runs out. So don't underestimate psychology. Truth is great. I'm a fan of truth, but in terms of power dynamics and action, I'd say psychology comes into play more. So
Then we're all going to die.
that
Because
sucks.
there's always going to be something else that is, if you're playing that game, the ones who win it are not the ones who
I think I have similar.
grasp on reality.
I think I have similar thoughts, not quite as assured as you. It's more of a fog for me for other issues and over a longer time scale. So I'm not taking this as a joke, but I'm not. I don't know. I see. Unfortunately for you, I guess I see other threats. Well, fortunately for all of us, if you're correct, I see other threats as more pressing. Unfortunately.
Well,
I guess another possibility is
I don't get what those other threats have anything to do with AI, unless you just mean that you think that AI is not a threat. And if you mean that, say that. Don't drag in irrelevant stuff.
I'm not
like
meaning
global
to.
warming,
Geez.
which
Okay,
has
I think
nothing to do
we're
with
just.
AI one way or the other.
I think maybe I'm just using the wrong word. I'm really not trying to dance around. I'm just trying to think of ways to say it that don't always land. I'm still very skeptical. AI makes us extinct, and we reach that level of superintelligence that you're talking about. It's
right. You don't think it's possible to build AI that powerful.
It just. I'm not sure if I think that, but it's more like I'm not seeing enough stuff align for that, from my limited understanding.
It's not meant to be a weird, exotic scenario. It's meant to be like where the ball's rolling downhill, unless something weird happens to stop it, like humanity waking up one day and deciding to survive, which would be pretty weird.
Well, it also assumes
unfortunately.
that it will reach this goal. It will reach this state that you're describing instead of something else like the Star Trek computer where it knows everything, but it's really just following orders.
Yeah, we don't know how to build that thing. We don't know how to build the Star Trek computer.
I know. It's
sort of contra to the nature of the technology in a way. You can try to get it to pretend to be the Star Trek computer, but you cannot control what actually ends up inside of it.
Oh, I get that, but you may not need to control what goes inside of it if it never goes in a direction that's an actual threat, is what I'm saying.
Because it's not smart enough?
Yeah, I mean, for extinction level, to clarify, I 100% can see some threats coming from AI, but I don't really see them as extinction level stuff, except for the nuclear one.
Then we're not seeing the same threats here. I'm not interested in arguing about the non-extinction level stuff.
Okay. This is why I respect your view on it, because you are eyes on the prize. I appreciate that. So even if I disagree with the conclusion of it, your logic is very consistent on this, and I hope you're wrong for all our sake, but I don't know. I mean, so.
I mean, it sounds like the upshot is that you've got your own theory of how intelligence works and where it comes from that says that we're not going to see AI smart enough to be a threat.
It just, I'm not 100% on it. It's just, to me, that seems, in my mind, that seems far more probable than the scenario you're describing, even though it's very easy to envision the scenario you're describing, if you see what I mean.
I mean, yeah, so because you think that there's something special about biological intelligence, that's very hard to get into transistors.
Yes.
And you think that when we try to program machines to do the work that biological intelligence does, we're ultimately programming them to fake intelligence in a way that changes the output and makes the output not be dangerous.
Yes, because I think it's not encapturing all of what our intelligence does. It's capturing aspects of it. Like with the plant scenario, it looks like a plant.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and the fact that there's an enormous amount of money to be made by making systems that are more powerful, you think that that they still just can't do it.
Sorry, I lost you. But repeat
But
that.
like you think that there's going to be like stuff missing from the cold mechanical calculations, and the fact that you can make an enormous amount of money by getting more stuff in there, you're like, yeah, they just can't do that with computers.
Yes. So yeah, yes, I think even with more resources, because we're still the target is too elusive in my understanding of it.
Yeah, so I did try to convince you of that on abstract grounds, but from my perspective, unless the technology stalls out, which it might, 2 years, 3 years, next Tuesday when you actually sit down with one of these systems and try playing around with it, you're predictably going to go like, uh-oh. Because
Well,
you're
I'm
going to
sure
see
that
that
I'm
these things
sure
are
my
more
chat
powerful
will
than you
send me
thought.
plenty of examples or maybe further reading after this that I should.
Yeah, if what you think the machines can't do is like sufficiently concrete to be like like a
It's not that I
scientific
think can't.
hypothesis rather than a
No.
philosophy.
I guess it's not that I think they can't. It's that it seems incredibly unlikely without us being able to define how consciousness works or how intelligence works in a way that really encompasses everything we get. And I think we disagree on how much it encompasses.
Yeah, I could try to do that, but it's kind of
It
beyond the
might be
scope
it
of
might be
this thing.
too
And
high level
I was
for
trying
me.
to like I was
I
trying to
can.
lead you there. I was trying to lead you there via Socratic questioning to get you like less in the mindset of is it real, is it fake, and more in the mindset of what does it do, what is it calculating, what does it mean. So I was trying to like move you
Maybe I
along
need a
via
couple
Socratic
more years
questioning
before
to.
I get scared. Like, that's the.
It depends. I mean, have you played with GPT-4?
Oh, not directly. A friend of mine has it. I've asked a few questions. It gets stuff wrong. Like it's, and I mean, I see the.
Yeah. It also gets things right that are clearly beyond the level of parroting stuff back.
Oh yeah,
And if you say that it's
I acknowledge it's doing more than parroting. I just see it. I mean, it's. Again,
it's combining a lot of patterns, but so are you.
yeah,
There's
but
something
I'm
like
combining even more, like or different kinds, different. Yeah, no. Obviously, the AI is combining more. Well, it's hazy because it's a little bit apples to oranges, I think. But
so the hope is that politicians coming at this, voters coming at this, are not like yes, like I have this elaborate philosophy that says these things can never be dangerous. They just like look at what they're actually doing and go like, whoa, which is like
I think you
kind of
need to
better
find a way to
science.
scare them more. I think I really. I don't mean you need to scare them dishonestly, but maybe find something more basic they could like. You know, you might even be able to dovetail into this into cybersecurity somehow. Like if there was an attack that was AI driven that really.
It's not they're not you're not going to like shut down, you're not going to like monitor all of the GPU centers internationally and shut down the large training
No. What
runs
I'm saying
because
is
you're
where
scared
there's a
of
will, there's a
cybersecurity.
way. You need to get that will into powerful people, and I don't know how you do that. If they have incentives to do the opposite.
Only the actual danger will
But
result in
but
that
then
will.
it's too late.
There,
You know.
no, what I mean is that is that if you tell them about like some stuff you made up about cybersecurity, they know that that's just like the usual world of the fake. They have people trying to sell them on stuff all the time. If you tell them like they need to like you can either convey the actual reality or you can't, from my perspective. I don't see what besides the actual reality motivates the actual policies that would be required. And I don't expect this to
personal.
work.
They
But I
have to
don't
really
expect the
believe
clever.
it.
I don't
They have
expect the
to
clever
believe
4D
it,
chess
and
to work.
for a lot of politicians, they're not going to. I don't think. I mean, they might pretend to cater to it, but look,
Then
we've. You're probably familiar with
then they can just as easily reject whatever fake stuff you dream up that's supposed to be persuasive. They can just as easily reject
Well,
that.
no. If they're being paid to go in the opposite direction, then that's what they're going to do, I think. I was going to say, you probably heard of the famous quote that the internet is a series of tubes from Congress. Like, I feel like that's the level you're going to be dealing with a lot of...
The internet is, in fact, a series of tubes.
Well, I think
and
he
there
was
are
meaning it
packets moving
more...
through them.
I've seen another political video where a politician was up in Congress and they were talking about like a settlement on an island, how it caused the ground to like get lower to the water table, and he was asking, well, is the island going to tip because of it? So it's like, I really would assume a low level.
Yeah, okay. It's not actually very complicated. There's companies that are building stuff that get smarter and smarter and smarter.
Right.
Because as they get smarter, they generate more money. When they get smart enough, they will kill everyone because tech companies don't understand what they're doing. Nobody understands what they're doing. They're not going to get it exactly right on the first try. This is a bad idea and we should not do it. It's not actually a very complicated story.
Okay, I realized, okay, you may disagree on this, Doc, but I realized for me the answer's been staring at me in the face. Get people who 100% believe this, like wealthy people, get them to lobby the hell out of it. There's been a very strong correlation found, I think it was a Princeton study from several years back, showing that there's a like 90% correlation with what the very wealthy want and versus policy that gets passed. But for the average person, it was almost like there was no correlation almost. I could find that Princeton study. The chat might even be able to pull it up for me. So yeah, you don't need everyone on board if you can get the right people with power. And if I were you, that's where I would focus my energy on, is trying to get them to lobby in that direction. And then once you have that, they can maybe lead by example for other countries. So some people aren't going to be on board. Some people, just because how their brain works, aren't going to be on board with something until a bunch of people are on board. Yeah.
Okay. No offense here. But
okay, no, it's okay. You can offend.
The conversation sliding into like, yes, well, like, how do you persuade this group or that group? This is kind of what's wrong with humanity at the moment, in my own opinion. That people cannot just have conversations about what is true, what is real, what are the actual facts of the matter. The clever planning is something that can happen outside of this conversation, and I frankly don't think it's all that smart to be clever about it, really. But this conversation is not about what do other people believe.
No, it's not. It's only as a means towards accomplishing your goal of save humanity.
We're not here to accomplish my goals.
Okay. I didn't have to veer into that. Sorry. I can see you have a very narrow focus, but understandably, given, I mean, I don't know. If it was me, I would be interested in logistics also, but I'm not trying to push that in that direction.
Okay, so like the ability to have a conversation about the state of reality without getting derailed by the question of interest of like convincing political factions of it is an important thing to humanity. This, I came on here to have a conversation about reality.
I think we did for like the first 90%, huh? Or we tried, or I tried.
Yeah, and yeah. And
I thought this was just I thought this was icing on the cake. I wasn't trying to derail it.
From my perspective, is the sickness among the many sicknesses at the heart of humanity. Just like have a conversation about what's real.
Well, I think we mostly accomplished it, and I apologized if I derailed that aspect of it. I'm trying here.
Yeah. I'm not saying it was like dumb. I'm just kind of like internally screaming.
It's all right. I'm not offended even if you do think it is. Like, I think we just have a very different. I think I get what you're saying because. To me, it's like if I was saying, oh, well, that would never happen because we can just unplug them or something when talking about a super intelligent thing. It's like I'm missing the forest for the trees then, but from that line of thinking. In my opinion, this would be like the next obvious step if you're convinced it is an issue. But if that's different for you, then I'm not trying to derail you or go down a rabbit hole you think is irrelevant. So it's, I think
that if the world is,
Go
if the
ahead.
world is saved here, it will be because people managed to remember that reality existed with respect to this issue. And
Yeah.
asking about who you can persuade is a way of forgetting that reality exists.
Okay. One question then. If you can't answer it, I understand. What would you say your upper margin is for when this happens? Like you were saying, you'll be thrilled if it's even 30 years.
Timing is hard.
It's too hard to
I
predict. Yeah.
it like my guess is that it takes between 0 and 2 fundamental breakthroughs the size of transformers before the world ends. How long does it take to get 0 to 2 breakthroughs of that size? I don't know. The
Okay.
last one was
Okay.
in
I was
2000.
just curious. I can understand that that's too difficult to figure
The
out.
last big old breakthrough of that size was in 2018, and depending on and then there's like even a much larger breakthrough, which is like deep learning itself, which is kind of hard to localize down in time, but that was around like 2006, sort of. Figuring out how to propagate the gradients in a network, which is a whole bunch of different tricks that have been piled up over time. So yeah, like we could be so like we could get like a major breakthrough in 6 months now that there's like so much more money and attention going into this. Then we get another breakthrough after that in 2 years now that there's so much more money and attention going into this. Or it could be that like humanity just scales really poorly. It doesn't matter how much money and attention you pile onto this stuff. Most of it is just
Yeah.
going to commercializing the existing stuff, and then it takes like another 5 years for the next breakthrough, and that breakthrough isn't enough, and it takes another 6 years after that. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Okay. The chat has a question that's above my level. Do you want to hear it or?
Sure, why
Okay.
not?
Ask him if diffusion models are a breakthrough like transformers.
Not yet. Though the transformers were not immediately visible as being as powerful as they were. My impression is that, well, in particular, like it hasn't been demonstrated yet that diffusion works on the same level of generality as transformers. So like they've been super powerful on the image side of things, whereas transformers have been powerful on the text side of things and the image side of things and obscure kinds of things. And the thing that they're good at, which is text, like proved to be very good at understanding all the things, well, many of the things that text is a shadow of. So I do feel like maybe diffusion, people are going to pile onto it. They're going to work out the bugs. They're going to like figure out the better versions of it. And maybe it's going to prove to be as large as transformers. And, in a few years, nobody's going to bother having transformer systems because it's all just going to be diffusion. But this is mostly not what I guess.
Okay. That one's not for me. That one's above my level. So I'm just relaying it to the people watching for if anyone had that burning question. I guess I don't have too much more. I hope this was helpful for you in the sense of sort of gauging where some outsiders are on this to maybe help with your strategy for this.
Well, to be honest, it wasn't exactly what I ended up hoping it would be, because I was hoping it was going to be like sort of more broad ranging. And I think that it did sort of like stay ultimately stuck on the question of like, is it all just fake and stuff that I can't answer without diving into the weeds of like how intelligence works.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we stayed on target pretty well for what
We
we
did
have.
we did stay on target.
Yeah, because I mean, I wrote up a lot of things, but I realized depending on how this conversation goes, I might have to throw over half of this. So and that's kind of what happened. It was kind of half and half for the
Yeah.
notes I made
No,
myself.
you didn't do anything wrong. You had your central question and you stuck to it, and that's fine.
Well, that's
Like
if you're right, that's the only one that matters. So I mean,
well, oh no, for lots of people have a different central question. For lots of people, they're happy to concede that something smarter than human might come along, but then they don't see how that could hurt them because we can
no,
just
I
totally
can
off.
envision that. I mean, that's analogy. I think. Yeah, well, I'll admit
For
you
lots
gave
of
me a tinge of doubt, but I really need to have it spelled. Okay,
yeah,
my caveman, my caveman inherited brain needs it spelled out a little more for me. So maybe the chat will help me with that later. I'm sure there's someone watching this is just jumping up and down, wishing I would get it, or when you're frustrated watching somebody who's just.
well, no, I haven't seen the chat, but I'm guessing that a bunch of them are jumping up and down about how they have a completely different central question and they're
Well, you
willing
may
to
be
completely
disappointed.
skip over yours.
I've only been able to glance at it a little bit. I know some people were latching on to the Transformers pun for Transformers in the sky. Unfortunately, that might be more. That might be more some of the makeup of my viewer base, but it's a mix. There's going to be some people who are way above me that are gonna certainly want to know more, or else maybe you woke them up, or So
Okay. I mean, I
I'm on
mostly wouldn't
board
expect
if
to,
someone
'cause
can really spell it out for me, but it's just it still seems too much of a long shot for me. So that's where I am
mean,
right now with this.
so I could try spelling. So the thing that I was okay. So like to sort of like not leave you without sort of like trying to spell it out.
Okay, I really feel like you
Intelligence.
tried. I just might need someone to dumb it down even more. But
Intelligence is the ability to model and predict reality, including pieces of it that you didn't get exposed to before, and the ability to plan through the model. If there's a heartbeat of intelligence, it's sensory information coming in, motor actions going out.
not to rehash the whole thing again, but I feel like a key ingredient is kind of self-determination, but that could kind of that could kind of rehash a lot of stuff we already covered, I think.
Yeah, so like to spell it out, I think that your model of intelligence is actually wrong, and that you're sort of like thinking that a bunch of things are bundled together, where the underlying realities of cognitive science don't have these things bundled in quite the same way. The parts that you're worried about are not quite where the danger comes from, and you can have AI systems that are not quite like humans are in some ways and still end up quite dangerous. I think your model of where goals come from is probably not correct, because I was trying to be like, well, goals got into humans this way via natural selection, and the same process would be liable to put goals in via gradient descent, though they'd be different goals. And that's sort of and that yeah, it's sort of like to like explicitly spell it out in case I didn't explicitly spell it out. There it is.
I'm hoping smarter people than myself watch this afterwards. I'll put it up, so maybe I'm thinking of there was like an old parody, I think, called the Church of the Subgenius. I feel like maybe
I remember.
I would be a member. I never
Praise
never
Bob.
got to look. I just know it has Bob with the pipe. I never really got to look into that, but I always meant to. But I like that name. I feel like I feel like I might be a subgenius. A little bit underneath there. So like not stupid, but not quite to the breakthrough level.
I mean,
So.
I don't think I'm eligible for membership myself, but I really appreciated the vibes.
Yeah, well, I mean, my instincts tell me that when someone's really trying to explain something to me, and I just seem to keep missing it, that might mean that I'm just not smart enough to grab it at this phase. So that's generally been my experience with things like that before. When I was in high school, I think I had AP calculus for a week or two, and I realized I'm just one step behind every time. I ended up dropping down to like the level below that, and then that was just right. So maybe you were too concentrated a dose for me, and I need something a little diluted
Yeah,
from somebody else.
I'm usually very reluctant to tell people to like doubt their own models, because it's just your model, man. Because I think that when you tell people that, they learn like they either if they listen to you, they learn a kind of inner despair where they stop trying to have models at all. And so I don't want you to let go of your own model.
I'm just I don't know if I'm almost look at life like it's a survival game now. So I'm not.
Okay.
It's despair. Life is preferable to death is the way I see it. So, but I have to be convinced that down this path leads to death and not more food or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the part I need to like really get.
So different people have different levels of worry about this. Geoffrey Hinton, who's sort of like the inventor of the whole field of deep learning to the extent anyone can be said to be, recently resigned from Google so that he could speak out more openly against these issues. And He thinks that the extinction of humanity is a running concern in the near-term future. I'm on that side. There's also people like Jan LeCun, the chief scientist of Facebook, who poo-poo the whole thing and are like this is like a foolish thing believed by foolish people who have no idea how AI works. Of course, he said all that before Geoffrey Hinton resigned, and has yet to apologize. But there's different opinions about how much danger there is over here. So I'm not going to tell you that science has a distinct answer. I will say that your own theory of intelligence isn't actually widely believed in the field. Like
I guess it wouldn't be. I mean, if
yeah, and I'm not telling you to let go of your current understanding, but maybe like sort of superposition.
You know what? I'm gonna flow to where I'll let go of my understanding in a heartbeat if the evidence is there. It's just that, and I comprehend it. You know, that's. Yeah. It's not about that.
I'm not asking you to jump ahead on that.
So
just something like superposing the simpler theory, which is that there's these thinky things that people are getting computers to do these days, and they're putting a lot of effort into making them thinkier.
I get it.
And they've had a whole bunch of success that many people weren't expecting. And if they get thinky enough, we might all die. And you do have a theory that says that they can't get thinky enough, but sort of superposed on that, my understanding says this can't happen, but there's also a pretty simple model, like simpler than your own model even, where there's a danger going on there.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Well, I don't know.
Not telling you to let go and stop asking questions.
What?
Not telling you to give up your model and stop asking questions.
Look, I can only imagine the emails I'm going to get after this. Well, yeah. Okay, I'm not promising. I'll look at it quickly, but my email's rosswscott@gmail.com. If anyone's watching this isn't my usual audience, that you feel like you have to tell me to help me get it, so I become another prophet.
Sir, Sir, you do not know what you do.
No, I'm pretty far behind on emails.
You have condemned yourself to your own fate.
I know. Well, to quote the movie Inglourious Bastards, it's like, no, I'll get chewed out. I've been chewed out before.
You're going to get chewed out. You're going to get chewed out on all different sides, right? People are not going to email you with one theory about
you know what? I'd rather get chewed out and know the truth than not. So.
You're not going to get chewed out by like one set of opinions here is what I'm saying. There's going to be like 10 different emails or 10 different categories of theory that people are going to email you with, claiming that it's all very obvious.
Well, I'm going to be slow to look at it because I do have a lot of emails, but it's
one
for sure. I think this was a good discussion. Then I hope somebody benefits from it. I think there's a decent chance there will. Has this gone on a similar way to some of your others, or?
Sort of. I've similar, like from my perspective, this falls into the category of people whose basic stumbling point is, can AI even get that far?
Yeah.
And like, how does it have like the internal drive when it's not a living thing? I do feel like this is like the second podcast I've done where that was a primary theme, though the first podcast like that, as far as I know, hasn't come out yet, so you're still going to get to scoop them on that.
Okay. If I'm lucky, I'll get this out tomorrow. Or
final thoughts. The emails you get when they're like, Yudkowsky argues this thing, which is terribly wrong. Don't believe them about what they say that
okay,
I argue.
I really tried to stay in the dark on you, but I accidentally saw one or two comments. They didn't reveal anything fundamental, but I noticed, like before this, some were saying you're an expert, others saying, no, he's a fool. And I was thinking, well, okay, this is interesting. I think I can pretty conclusively say you're not a fool, okay? For anybody, like, because I didn't know about you. I did not know exactly which way this was going to go. And I can tell you, given it a lot of thought, but I mean, it's still in a fog for me. It's not enough that I think, it's, like I said, you gave me a tinge of doubt. So that.
I do never describe myself as an expert if I can avoid it.
Yeah, but no, I mean, this was, you weren't, in my opinion, you weren't pulling out a lot of cheap shots with the reasoning and like faulty, Well, I like that from the beginning about your conclusion that no, this moratorium does not go far enough, because that means you believe that it's an existential threat. So, I mean, that's very consistent logic on that.
Yep. There's a lot of things that people have claimed I said, which I have not said. So,
big
big old grain of salt.
That happens to me from my own audience about my own videos, which anyone can go and watch to me. So it's like, well, you said this in that video.
You know.
So the hard evidence is there. You say, yeah, well, you just gotta just let that roll off you. It's not worth getting hung up on that. Well, I'm still a little confused about the logistic, your attitude towards the logistics, but that's not that important for this discussion. I would just say eyes on the prize if you're trying to do it. So you have your own strategy for this. So I hope things go well, whatever that is. So I think that's the way I would describe it. So if you're right, I hope you get everything you're shooting for, and if I'm right, then I hope we have longer term disasters to deal with. So
I think you mainly pray for me to be wrong.
If it rises to that threat for me, but you gave me food for thought. It's
like the hope that it's not that much of a threat is the hope that I'm wrong.
I get you. I think we better wind this down, because I think I'm just going to frustrate you unintentionally with how it's not quite getting it. So it's,
man, if you're asking your own questions and speaking your own viewpoints, then there's an honesty to that, and I respect that.
Yeah, well, good luck with your endeavors. Anything else you wanted to say before wind this down, or?
I mean, not super duper. If there's
okay, we have one more technical question.
Okay. I did.
Okay,
have
sorry, I didn't mean
last
to cut
thing.
you off.
Well, but before that, so if there are technically minded people in the audience who wanted a completely different set of questions addressed, then Googling AGI ruin, a list of lethalities, will get you a completely different set of questions addressed by me.
Okay. Let's see. Well, let me make sure this isn't a question you've already answered. Please. You might have answered this, but I'm not certain, so I'll read it. Assuming regulation is put in place on compute as you want, don't you fear that this will simply create additional pressure to make smarter systems of the kind you fear that can run on consumer hardware, perhaps distributed and decentralized?
Oh, they can already run on consumer hardware. Training them, creating them, is what requires amounts of compute so large that you can regulate the data centers.
Okay, well, I don't have anything else. This turned out more interesting than I thought, so that's good. Thanks for inviting yourself on. Maybe more people out of the ether will do this,
Thanks for accepting my sudden invitation of myself.
I like that you're just having a casual conversation, then just out of nowhere the person comes up, hey, do you want to discuss this further on something interesting? That's great. I'm almost living the dream a little bit in that sense, where I don't know what's coming, So.
All right. Toodle-littles.
Okay. Thanks for showing up. See you later.